Stop, Friendly Fire. Chapter 48 to 49. Chapter 48. Premature Family Plan. You have hunted one of the 12 generals, the LV8 Metal God General, Urema Steelworker. All contributing heroes gain 50 million perium and all stats are increased by 100. You have acquired 15 permits to God's secret shop. Proficiency in all combat-related skills increases significantly. The wild card skill has become LV4. All stats have increased by 30. You can now more naturally mix your skills together and disguise them. The manatization skill has become LV4, and health and magic have increased by 10. All of your skin is manatized, allowing you to use mana more efficiently. However, your physical strength is reduced by an equivalent amount. A portion of your strength, health, and agility are converted into magic. The mana acceleration and high-rank mana bone skills have become LV9, and magic has increased by 40. You may have figured out how to wield the very source of mana. The time when these two skills fuse is nearing. The high-rank assimilation skill has become LV7. Agility and magic have increased by 40. You have received God's grace. The invisible heart skill's maximum level has increased by 10. Shin Woo received his rewards from the battle only after all the Kai Pals had finished transforming into androids. Since they ate the golems whole, he didn't receive any perium, any metal, it probably transformed into bone, or any golem cores. However, he still managed to receive the reward for defeating one of the 12 generals, albeit belatedly. My apologies, Father, I wasn't even thinking. No, it was because of your Avenger karma. It's fine. I'd rather you level up than get 1 or 2 level 8 bones. You have nothing to feel sorry about, Kai Pal. Father, I'd appreciate it if you weren't so touched by everything I say. Shin Woo felt a little guilty, since they retained their title of Kai Pal, despite no longer being chimeras, and checked how they felt. When he asked them about it, they responded with, "We like this name, since it's the name you gave us, Father," which only made him feel even guiltier. You manipulated a battlefield containing the 12 generals as you pleased and attained victory. Although you lost 2 of them, you killed 2 of the 12 generals and brought one of them over to your side. You sowed chaos, proving your standing as a joker. You have acquired the title, Compass Breaker, and all stats have increased by 30. Strength has increased by an additional 50. Why do I feel like these titles keep getting more and more chuny? Although I like how much they raise my stats. I got the title, Witch Who Challenges Time, and my magic and agility increased by 30. It's strange. The level of your titles are very different, Shin Woo. There was one thing that was fortunate for him. When he'd killed the Golden Shadow General, Velen von Dorth, only Jin and he had gained the hero rewards, but killing Urema Steelworker had yielded rewards for Kracia as well. However, there were still some rewards left that only Shin Woo could obtain. He was referring to the princess that was blinking her eyes beside him. Did her eyes still hurt a little bit? Shin Woo took out a handkerchief for her to wipe her tears, but then a message appeared. You have made one of the 12 generals, the LV8 Spirit General, Dana von Etleber, into your loyal subordinate, and have released her from the clutches of the undead curse. This is a greater achievement than simply killing one of the 12 generals. This act will cause your enemies to quake in fear while also raising the morale of your allies. All stats have increased by 100. You have acquired 20 permits to God's secret shop. Proficiency in all combat-related skills increases significantly. You have received God's grace. The invisible heart skill's maximum level has increased by 15. Proficiency in the high-rank command skill has increased. You now understand the potential that lies beyond the command skill. Ooh, I thought the species creator title meant I'd miss out on everything else, but guess not. Isn't it because that was your reward for creating a new species, rather than killing one of the 12 generals? Ha, gods being generous. Following the battle, Shin Woo's stats increased significantly, which resulted in his body undergoing a change. He closed his eyes gently and smiled. He'd already returned to his human form. But if God were actually here, then she'd feel awkward, as there wasn't much more that she could really do for him. Though his means were truly wicked, he'd managed to kill 2 level 8 members of the 12 generals, one of them being a spy from the surface with his own secret plan, and made another his subordinate. He'd done what none of the heroes had been able to do before, all in one spot. Even he didn't know how to feel about it, but in terms of results, he was a real hero. Ah, shall we eat the bones we couldn't eat before? Jin, you want them? I'm good, I'm fine now. Most of the bones weren't anything special, besides the Golden Shadow's leg bone. His bone was worth absorbing. With his high-ranked combat sense skill leveling up, Shin Woo's stats increased by a little more than 120. Furthermore, by absorbing his darkness knife, Shin Woo was finally able to summon weapons imbued with the darkness element. Moreover, they were more perfect than before. It seems like you've gotten even further away from me, Shin Woo. He's always like this. It seems like whenever you blink, this happens. So he was always such an exceptional individual. I understand. It was unbelievable. It hadn't been long since he'd leveled up, yet he was close to 20,000 total stats at 19,945. He'd given up on getting to level 9, as he'd felt it would be impossible, but at some point, the road to getting there had shortened significantly. He'd grown so much quicker than before, so he tilted his head in confusion. But in a way, it was only natural. When he'd become level 8, he'd been doing the unexplainable on a regular basis, causing his karma to skyrocket. I still need to increase my stats by about 6,000. It'll probably be difficult to get to level 9 before fighting the Emperor. Beating him should be a piece of cake if I reach level 9. That's what you call greed. I hope the Emperor doesn't come over here right away. After all, they just shot and created a huge blast at the capital. Kracia felt like they should run away ASAP, but Shin Woo firmly shook his head. You really think the Emperor could get out unscathed from that big of a blast? He can't respond right away. Moreover, there's the matter of his troops. At least 20% of his troops should have been vaporized by that blast. Probably not, hero. Surprisingly, Dana was the one who retorted. She folded the handkerchief, placed it within her chest, and spoke calmly. He had no idea why she was calling him hero. The capital's thorn wall is on a completely different level than the one here. It's because the source of darkness mana is in the capital. Moreover, my father, the Emperor, may have done something to it after becoming an undead. So your beams shouldn't have cut down their troops. It's that powerful? Regardless of how powerful the defense, troops level 5 or less would have been destroyed. However, low-leveled enemies are meaningless against us. In other words, assuming she were right, there were only elite level 6 troops or higher left in the capital. He was wondering why he hadn't gotten a message notifying him of some extraordinary feat, but if the capital's defenses were that thorough, then it made sense. Then we have to just be satisfied with them not getting any stronger. You weren't listening, hero. But then, for some reason, Dana smiled meaningfully. At that moment, a message appeared in front of Shin Woo. You have completely destroyed the capital's thorn wall, as well as the rest of its physical and magical defenses. You are the first to achieve such an incredible feat. Now your enemies will have to face the heroes in the open. The final battle is approaching. You have acquired the title, Shield Breaker. You have acquired the special passive skill, Soul Strike, Max. All your physical and magical attacks gain 10% true damage. Your attacks ignore your opponent's defenses, resistances, properties and inflict true damage onto them. You have fulfilled a portion of the conditions necessary to achieve the light and darkness fusion element. It seems like you've achieved a feat. It makes sense. You unleashed such light. The thorn wall must have collapsed. It wasn't just the thorn wall. I destroyed all of the capital's physical and magical defenses too. So this is what you were talking about. Yes, Shin Woo felt like he'd been struck by lightning. In other words, rather than reducing the capital's troops, Dana was. So you're saying it's more important that the blast eliminated all the capital's defenses? That's correct. My father was always more talented in defense, rather than offense. The capital's thorn wall was considered an absolute defense, and although he's been trapped in the capital for so many years, my father has drawn more power from the source to perfect the defense. Yet you destroyed it so? It was quite a delightful blast. The thorn wall, an obstacle that lay beyond the 12 generals, had been destroyed, so now the heroes could invade the capital freely. When he thought about it, it was truly ironic. He'd used the very weapon the Emperor had prepared to get to the surface to destroy his defenses. And because of that, he'd gained the Soul Strike skill in preparation for the final battle, so Shin Woo didn't have any complaints. Moreover, this skill smelled like an authority, just like his innate elements. The fact that he'd fulfilled a portion of the conditions necessary to acquire the light and darkness fusion element was proof of that. It meant that there was more to pursue. I can't really deny it anymore. Geez, while the talented heroes were fighting against the Demon King, I was just trying to find a way to be human again, so how did it turn out like this? It didn't matter, it didn't change anything. There was no reason to hide the fact that he'd fired the cannon anymore. He'd provoked the Emperor for sure, and he'd have to give it everything he had to keep himself alive. The Lich who'd lost his body once before was still out there too. Wait a sec, he thought back to the recent battle and recalled something. What was Sigald von Rededane even trying to do here? Wasn't he trying to recruit his little sister? He perfected the anti-skull process by watching the Pauls and led her here too. No, that's not it. He didn't come here for just Sarah. He came here for this cannon too. What's the original name again? Heaven-rending cannon? He was trying to do something with this too. Maybe he was trying to shoot it at the capital to strengthen the Emperor. No way. If that were his intention, then he wouldn't have gone about it like this. He would have sworn his allegiance to the Emperor and... he realized all of a sudden. When he thought back to how he used the heaven-rending cannon, then the answer became simple. He knew what Sigald had intended to use the cannon for. It was similar to what he'd used it for. The anti-skull test. The anti-skull test's objective is resisting the undead transformation. No, that's not it. It's to make sane undead. What happens if they're sane? They'll try to invade the surface. Jin realized it too now. Shin Woo is Sigald. Yeah, Shin Woo clicked his tongue and nodded his head. That bastard. By mixing his mana into the heaven-rending cannon and firing it at the capital, he was trying to convert all of the Imperial forces into anti-skull. He would lead the Emperor and invade the surface. Rather than hate the Emperor, who'd turned his people into the undead, he was trying to change his mind and correct his mistake. That was Sigald's goal. He was never against the Emperor in the first place. On the contrary, if the undead curse had never occurred, then he would still be the one closest to the Emperor. Now I get it. If we assume that that was his goal, then everything makes sense. I wonder how I never even considered it. Opposing the heaven-defying general, and backstabbing the metal god general, a spy sent from the surface were both. Then why start acting now? Because the anti-skull test wasn't perfect? Shin Woo briefly thought about it and soon firmly shook his head. There's that, but they also couldn't approach and convert the Emperor's forces into anti-skull given their strength. The entire reason we were able to cause such chaos here was because we'd killed so many of the 12 generals. That's really persuasive, coming from the guy who's killed most of them. The timing was paramount. He'd finally figured out Sigald's plan, but it didn't change anything, at least for the time being. At any rate, Sigald had failed miserably, and the once heaven-rending cannon, now heaven-defying flag-bearer, had expended all of its energy and shattered with Shin Woo placing it into his inventory after. But there's a chance he might try something similar in the future. We have to take this seriously. To think we'd have to worry about both the Imperial Army and anti-skull. You really should have killed Sigald back there. I'm so sorry that I wasn't skilled enough. He'd never even thought about this before, but if Sigald's technique worked on the Emperor or the Archmage, then it posed a serious problem. A simple issue he could originally deal with purely underground would suddenly involve the surface and turn into a major catastrophe. The biggest problem was that the undead curse, which had been suppressed thus far, was spreading to the surface. He had to stop that no matter what. The biggest threat to the surface wasn't the undead Emperor, it was Sigald von Rededane. Rededane might have known about this before. Maybe that's why she hated her older brother so much. Shin Woo, are your undead safe from anti-skull? Nothing to worry about there. The anti-skull transformation is a little inferior to my own process. Shin Woo's contract was a result of his innate skills as a joker, as well as his peak darkness mastery. No matter how hard Sigald tried to turn them, they were already contracted to Shin Woo, so he wouldn't be able to steal them from him. No, that's not the issue here. Listen to me. The current situation's more important than you are, senior. Don't just cut me off like that. Then, someone grabbed onto Shin Woo's armor from behind and began shaking him. It was, of course, the sleeping beauty that had belatedly awoken from her second nap, Prince. How's this even possible? How can something like this even happen? Please refer those questions to God. You really think I can meet God whenever I want like you? No. Well, I can't meet her whenever I want either. Once she regained consciousness, she didn't panic like they'd expected. Rather, she simply asked them for an explanation. So they gave her a detailed explanation. Once they did, she was in disbelief. If you weren't going to believe us, then why did you ask for an explanation? A skeleton and skeleton horse were heroes all along. Don't believe us then, it's your choice. Even without you, it doesn't change much in our fight against the Emperor. What do you mean, it doesn't change much? Don't you know how strong I am? I was just feeling under the weather today. If I use my full strength, then. Shin Woo and Jin were both relieved by her familiar response. They had, unknowingly, gotten attached to her in the time they'd spent together. Shin Woo just smiled at her nonsense and said, "In any case, I am your junior, senior prince, so please don't worry. I'm not entirely sure whether I'm undead or human anymore." Haha, that's because you're not normal, Shin Woo. I didn't even know that my junior was masquerading as the heaven-defying general and going around the empire like an idiot. It just turned out that way. By chance. Prince retained her perplexed expression. If she had remained calm, then he would have been worried. But her confusion was brief, and she seemed to have made her decision, as she placed her hand on Shin Woo's shoulder. You did good. You can rely on me from now on. You talk like you're actually reliable. Who cares if you're undead? You're just missing some muscles and skin. I can make them, you know. Wait, what? You? She was probably going to ask what was really on her mind now. Prince briefly hesitated and spoke while pouting. I lumped all the undead together without thinking about you, since I thought all undead were on the side of the Empire. It's okay. I'm sorry for not telling you earlier. Maybe I was just too afraid. He'd concluded that he couldn't reveal his identity to the heroes due to the undead curse or whatnot, but seeing her now, Shin Woo realized that perhaps he just hadn't trusted her enough. In the first place, Shin Woo wasn't familiar with abstract feelings like trust. Now that we're at it, should I tell seniors Lloyd and Arian about me? Jin, don't you want to try the chatting channel, too? Nope. Wait, wouldn't it be better if you did that face to face? It'll be a shock. You really aren't reliable in important matters, senior. Why not? I'm just taking everyone into consideration. The mood had certainly relaxed. Fortunately, Dana was someone he could get through to, unlike Sarah. Plus, she was friendly and sweet, so she immediately mingled with the group and began talking with them. Shin Woo thought, "Women are really amazing," and quietly hurried up. And arrived at the site for the final task remaining in the city. We've arrived. This is the Thorn Wall? Can't we just break it and leave? It's hard to get into the Thorn Wall, but it's not that hard to get out of the wall. Hero, I will. No. Shin Woo ignored the others, disembarked from Jin, and approached the wall. He seemed so defenseless that Dana tried to stop him, but Jin quietly shook her head. Shin Woo then began what he came to do. Gather. Agglomerate. He said just 2 words and extended his hand, placing it atop the thorn wall. His companions looked on while wondering, what is he doing? And tilted their heads. Soon, the thorn wall that seemed to wrap around the inner city vibrated, and soon after they widened their eyes. This isn't happening, right? The hero shouldn't have control over the thorn wall. I see. He's using a similar method that he used on the heaven-rending cannon with the proof of death. Of course he wasn't. Even without the proof of death, he could control the thorn wall however he wished. Once he told it to gather, the thorn wall obeyed and began to gather. It was no mere magical overlap any longer, it was a complete overlap, or unison. The evil eye's existence had gradually gotten even stronger due to the battle behind its walls. The evil eye, poorly processed by man, received Shin Woo's call and began to awaken from its slumber. It seemingly returned to its proper form. My God, overlapping matter itself? Did evil eye originally possess such an ability? No, that's impossible. Even the Emperor himself doesn't possess such a karma. When you see this, it makes you regret destroying the capital's thorn wall. Wouldn't it be broken when we get there? We can just pick up the pieces when we're there. No, I don't think that's the issue here. Since the source of darkness, where the evil eye ore is mined from, lies within the capital. He may be able to devour the very source of darkness as well, Dana thought. She watched as the thorn wall, with a circumference of several kilometers, begin to dwindle more and more until it was compressed so much that it could be seen in its entirety with the naked eye. When she saw that, she ended up thinking that, Shin Woo, what are you going to do with that? The others were either shocked, had stopped thinking entirely, or couldn't understand what was going on, so they kept their mouths shut. On the other hand, Kraysha's eyes shined, just like Li Shin Woo's, as she saw the thorn wall gradually reduce in size. Now that he thought about it, he'd been so busy since reuniting with her that he hadn't had a proper conversation with her as of yet. Li Shin Woo solemnly nodded his head and took out something from his chest. It was the Titan core. When she saw that, her eyes seemed to radiate light. Ooh, it's already been reinforced with dark flame. I'm going to reinforce it with this new ore and create a Titan that integrates all my flames together. Ooh, what a cool idea. Her radiant eyes seemed more blinding than the heaven-rending cannon's beam. In any case, he'd found someone to help him. If Kraysha helped him out, then he should be able to create an entirely new golem before the final battle. Li Shin Woo let her look over the core some more and concentrated on scaling down and compressing the evil eye. He'd already thrown in the piece of evil eye he'd picked up before. Around that point, the other heroes completely gave up on understanding what he was doing. How much time had passed? When the space the thorn wall had once occupied was empty, a watermelon-sized blackish-red ore was placed before them. It was giving off a truly dreary feeling. Li Shin Woo gulped and placed his hand atop it. You have acquired the LV9 Demon Heart. Oh, the name's changed. You used level 6 materials, yet it evolved into a level 9 item. Demon Heart. To think Shin Woo's heart, which he'd lost by becoming undead, would show up here. Hey, Li Shin Woo examined the Demon Heart. It was incredibly heavy, but he could somehow lift it with both hands. If he didn't use the darkness element, then it would have been impossible to lift. Its weight, its durability, and its magic. All of these were much greater than the original thorn wall. If he hadn't witnessed the compression process of the thorn wall, then even Li Shin Woo wouldn't have imagined that it came from the evil eye ore. Alright, we've got everything we came for. Let's go. But Shin Woo, where are we going? The wine factory? No, we're going somewhere even better. It had existed for several years but was so secretive that it hadn't been discovered by the emperor. Li Shin Woo knew of its location and had just recently become the owner of it. The Metal Army's secret base. No, let's call it our base now. You demon? That's definitely Shin Woo's heart. Heaven-defying General Paul Zero. So cool. Jin shook her head and muttered, but Kraysha nodded her head, as though she were impressed by anything Paul Zero did. Seeing that, Prince just said thoughtlessly, I'm hungry. Let's eat when we get there. No matter how hungry Prince was, or how much Kraysha wanted to study the Titan core, there was something else they had to do beforehand. It was collecting the loot from the battle. Li Shin Woo's party safely got out of Byron and then gathered with the android Kai Pauls, the Kai Pauls that had already withdrawn from the city, and the giants. He praised them for their hard work and then reinforced them with the bones that were gathered. Thank you very much, Lord Paul Zero. There's not much time left. Are you all ready? We all saw the light that you unleashed, Lord Paul Zero. We're prepared to sacrifice everything for you at any time. Glory to the Titan. All right, good. Those who haven't been reinforced yet, come forward. He first reinforced them, fully healing them and strengthening them. Then, they hid within one of their nearby bases and got back on track. What a huge army. No matter how I look at it, those giants don't fit at all. Haha, they're just a portion of my army. Some of my forces are also on the surface. This is a secret, but Jin already knows about me and is doing something for me on the surface. Even Yi Jin. I'm the senior here, but I've never been to the surface before. All the citizens of the underground empire yearn to go the surface, yet you so easily. He'd managed to collect the thorn wall, the loot, as well as the forces he'd brought with him. By the time he was finished with all that, Li Shin Woo was about to activate the Heaven Door's key but remembered that he had some things to do before going to the Metal Army's base. Therefore, he decided to visit the wine factory first, which was near the level 3 danger zone. Plus, most of the materials that Kraysha had studied had been left there, and above all, he needed to check on the progress of the wine. Junior, You're good at cooking food with oil. Well, this is how it turns out when a man cooks. One more bowl. Once the long, exhausting battle was over, Shin Woo cooked meat fried rice over high heat. He called it high heat, but he was actually using his LV7 high-rank fire element for his companions, who yearned for food more than anything else. The best way to prepare delicious food when one couldn't cook well was to use delicious ingredients and prepare them in the simplest way. Of course, everyone liked his food. It's quite delicious, hero. There's nothing you can't do. There are things Shin Woo can't do. Like fighting head to head. Jin, aren't you being too hard on me lately? Ah, we have soup too. He also prepared a soup using a variety of vegetables from the surface. The soup's base tasted like something between soybean paste and soy sauce, and he let it come to a roaring boil. Because he prepared it so simply, it tasted good. It was quite mild compared to the rich fried rice, yet it was nonetheless filled with flavor, making the two dishes a good match. This soup is delicious. Why didn't you cook before, if you were so good at it? I couldn't eat before, so I didn't really want to cook for other people. You're really honest? Ah, give me another bowl too. But now, he could enjoy food. He tried his best to ignore Jin's betrayed look and ate some more fried rice. Right now, he felt like he had made the right call to pursue a human body. However, Jin wasn't the only one staring at him. He turned around, looked at the almost completely still woman, and tilted his head. What, you're not eating? You can eat too, you know. How can you be so nonchalant about all this? She, the elder Banshee princess, Sarah von Rededane's hands shook in rage. But she couldn't just throw away her bowl of food, so she placed it onto the floor, pointed her finger at Shin Woo, and said, "We have something else to talk about. Because of you, I turned into this. Plus, I turned into an undead. How can you be so calm and eat as if nothing happened when Shin Woo has been hiding the fact that he's been undead this entire time? How is that even possible? How can you eat his food without a care in the world? I already knew a while back, so it doesn't matter. I know he's not a bad guy, so there's no helping it. Moreover, he's my junior. Plus, he doesn't smell like he's dead. From the outside, oh, I guess it's the same on the inside too. He's completely human. More importantly, he's on my side." Kracia answered immediately. Prince, with her lips smeared with oily rice, also came to his defense, though she was extremely biased. Whereas, Jin, who was likewise an undead hero like Shin Woo, said nothing. The immoral Princess Dana, who had been eating her third bowl of fried rice, looked at her close friend and former fiancé's younger sister and laughed. "Sarah, you've been freed of the undead curse. You shouldn't waste your time being dissatisfied and throwing a tantrum. If it wasn't for the hero, then you wouldn't be able to eat this delicious food. I'm in the same boat as well." Dana, although the two species were completely different, one being an immortal while the other was a banshee, as well as one being alive and the other undead, their situation was the same. They were given another chance at life by Shin Woo. And on the same day at that. It's a blessing, Sarah. You're happy you're alive, right? Being able to move forward, it's such a precious thing. Moreover, didn't the hero say that it didn't matter what we looked like? What matters is that we're here, alive. But thus far he's completely. It doesn't matter if he's deceived you. You know why he had to lie to you, Sarah. I still can't accept this. This isn't what I chose. This is contract fraud. TCH. She found out. He figured she'd be happy that he saved her, but it seems like she was still going through puberty. Shin Woo was about to say something, but Dana winked at him. She was telling him to leave it to her. The hero was willing to go that far to save you and give you another chance. At the time, you couldn't make a rational decision, could you? Why don't you first think about why he saved you when he normally cuts down his enemies without mercy? Dana, I know, Sarah, there's too much that happened all at once for you to accept it. Mulling things over is a good thing. But Sarah, let's take it slow, step by step and think about things together. There's no need to rush. We can be together from now on. But there is one thing. Dana's motherly speech caused even Sarah's expression to soften. Seeing that, Shin Woo realized that not just anyone could be a princess. During that time, Dana's attitude changed. Her emotions had intensified, signaling to him that she was instinctively gathering various types of elemental mana. One thing we can't take slow is our revenge. To be honest, I really don't care what happens to the surface from now on, but I must take my revenge on my father, who bound me for so many years and made me like this, as well as his forces and my fiancé who abandoned me. Dana, can you help me, Sarah? Could you trust me and the hero, and help us? He'd already formed an official contract with her, so he didn't need to check what she was thinking. But even knowing that, Dana still gave Sarah the chance to make her own decision. As she said, she was starting small. She was trying to resolve Sarah's countless contradictions and aspirations one by one. Did she succeed? Sarah soon sighed and shook her head. Stop speaking nonsense, Dana. I know already. That I already made my choice. At this point, I'm just spitting on my own face. She's right. She was just wasting time. However, she picked up the bowl of fried rice and soup again, so Shin Woo decided not to intervene. Dana looked satisfied with herself as she backed off. If you already know, then there's nothing more I have to say. But I do have a question. Why are acting so close to Shin Woo? I'm pretty sure you've only known him for a few hours, so why are you acting like that? Did he brainwash you? Oh my, Dana's eyes lit up. Jin, who sensed something unusual going on, kicked Shin Woo, but he was actually innocent this time. He'd already formed an official contract with her, and there was no need to enter a relationship with her, so why would he be attracted to her? He hasn't brainwashed me, Sarah. I just felt fated to be with him, that's all. Think about it, Sarah. It would be strange if I hadn't fallen for him. A brave hero saving me from all that pain and suffering. That kind of pure and beautiful love only shows up in fairy tales. It doesn't often work out that way. Moreover, why are you calling him hero? There's a limit to being old-fashioned. You were always so pessimistic, Sarah. That's why men didn't approach you. What? That goes for you as well. I already had a fiancé before I was even born, so I couldn't even dream of love. It was going so well, but they started arguing over an unexpected topic. The level 8 Banshee and Immortal were looking at each other so seriously. Shin Woo stood up in a fluster. If you're done eating, then should I bring out the dessert? I've cooled some wine jelly, so I'll just bring it right up. Not yet. I'll soon finish eating, so please wait a little longer. However, Sarah herself stopped Shin Woo. She glared at Dana, as if deeply unsatisfied. For her, it was quite the rare expression, and then began to eat some fried rice. The fact that she was eating her food meant that she accepted the situation. He thought she'd throw a tantrum before calming down, but things had surprisingly gone better than expected. Shin Woo sat back down, and Sarah looked at him with a satisfied, yet lukewarm expression, as though something was bland. Her skin was paler now that she was an undead, making her lips more alluring than before. She pouted and said, "The fried rice and soup were delicious. I'm glad to hear it." While Sarah was eating, Shin Woo finished his work in the wine factory and called the dryads, who were hiding due to the shock from unexpected visitors. He introduced them to Dana, and as expected, they were really happy to see her. There really were living spirits left in the underground empire. What a joyous occasion. It's nice to meet you, princess. It's the famous princess. She's not human, but she's still alive. I smell Paul Zero from her. She must have formed a contract with Paul Zero. So that's why she's still alive. She smells good. Want to play with us? Want to imitate Paul Zero? Dana brightened up immediately. The other's mood brightened as well. Jin followed Dana and began conversing with the dryads as well. He'd wondered how this would go a while back, but it seemed like it had all worked out. Shin Woo sighed in relief and drew in her empty bowl from behind. It was shining as if he didn't even need to wash it. Shin Woo took it and stared at her. Then, Sarah added in an unnecessary explanation. In the Empire, eating everything off your plate is the greatest compliment to the chef. It's not because I was hungry. So that's why everyone ate everything. But, didn't you used to speak politely to me? We've formed a master-servant contract, so wouldn't me speaking politely be kind of weird? And it's not my style anyway. I see. He played along with Prince because it was fun. Shin Woo took the bowl and threw it into his inventory. Sarah watched vacantly as he did so and added, "My inventories disappeared. How unfortunate. I wanted to brew a cup of tea for you in exchange for the meal. I can just buy you a teapot and some tea leaves later." "Is that so? Thank you." Sarah thanked him and nodded her head. He thought that'd be it, so he turned around, but she grabbed onto him once more. Now, I don't have to cling to the Reddidane name anymore. It's all because of you. Man, you really have to pin everything on me? So, you can call me Sarah now. Huh? I'm going to try living as Banshee Sarah from now on. That's all. Sarah turned around and left. He watched her, dumbfounded, and Jin, who'd come back secretly, kicked him once more. He couldn't tell why she'd done that at all. Shin Woo was barely able to get Dana to part with the dryads by promising to introduce her to the spirits on the surface. Then, he and his party left the wine factory and traveled to the Metal Army's base. If he hadn't acquired the administrator's seal and been to their base before, then he wouldn't have been able to lead them into the chaos, and if that happened, he would have had to work that much harder to lower the Imperial Army and the Anti-Skull's forces. Moreover, it's because of that we got ourselves such a nice facility. That's really not the way a human being thinks. Wow, I didn't know you could use golems like this. I'm really satisfied. It's quite vast. To think they built and operated a hidden facility like this. They had taken the golem train and arrived at the Metal Army's base. While the younger generation of heroes looked around, as if fascinated, Sarah and Dana were absolutely speechless. Of course, they realized by now that Arama Steelworker was a spy from the surface, but they hadn't expected such an expansive facility being run under the entire empire in the past, even when the underground empire was still thriving. It's because of this that they were able to move so covertly. I'm surprised you were able to recreate that seal or whatnot, hero. It's not easy to do, even for a magician. The Empire had the Archmage, Theotane von Selden, but even he wasn't able to find this base. This base had existed for far too long for him to blame it on them becoming undead. Shin Woo just shrugged his shoulders. Now that you mention it, I feel like it's because of my innate ability. Using bone reinforcement on the golems helped too, since it lets me look at them closely. I see. It's a combination of your talent and your disposition. Makes sense. Let's take a look, starting from the outside. They passed the golem train terminal and first encountered a long, outside corridor. There were a few huge rooms and warehouses, but all of them were empty. He assumed that they were originally filled with his troops, level 6 golems. They were, of course, in his Kai-Paul's bellies now. But this shouldn't be all there is. They should have a golem manufacturing facility somewhere. He was well aware of this, as he'd killed some of them. There were, of course, golems that had been created dozens of years ago, but there had also been golems with recent production numbers among them. While spying on the underground empire, Arama Steelworker had also been increasing his forces. His party had finished looking through the outer corridors, and then went towards the inner facilities, which couldn't be accessed without the Steelworker seal. They were really excited, and... it's over there. Kracia's yell resounded as if sounding fanfare. The party soon entered a huge room filled with devices and mysterious crystals. Above all, both walls were adorned with vaults filled with level 6 original cores. Once she saw the cores, she couldn't contain her excitement. Kracia, is this? Yeah. Kracia nodded her head enthusiastically as if deeply moved. Whenever she was introduced to a new, unknown magical technique, she tended to get really excited. A manufacturing facility that produces a large quantity of original cores. It really did exist. The surface's magic engineering is amazing. Kracia, you seem a bit different. Kracia completely ignored Prince and uttered a sound, as if she were a human power plant, and rushed over to the magical device and began to observe it. He would feel bad if he interrupted her since she was concentrating so hard. Shin Woo decided to leave this entire facility to Kracia and looked through the other facilities. He looked through the golem's weapon storehouse, the material storehouse, the golem production facility, as well as the repair facility. Even Shin Woo had gotten excited from looking through these storehouses that remained intact for dozens of years. I should be able to expand the golem squad significantly. Oh God, God'll like it too, probably. By the time he'd gone through about 80% of the inner facilities, Shin Woo found one of the things he was looking for. It was the golem terminal that remotely controlled the railroad. Jin, do you remember what that steelworker bastard told us last time? It was when we still had to get their permission to use the golem trains. Did they even say anything important regarding the trains? They did. It was incredibly important info at that. They definitely told us that they had a line that went directly to the capital. The capital. Oh my god, there's a line that goes directly to the capital. Dana and Sarah, who'd both been quietly listening in, yelled in astonishment. They should know exactly what this meant. Shin Woo nodded his head and added, I'm pretty sure it was guillotine. He said that, in the process of escaping the capital, we completely destroyed the passageway and the road was closed. He must have been lying. He was lying. They had been fighting like prepubescent girls before, but now they were agreeing with each other. Shin Woo felt that their relationship was really entertaining and nodded his head. It's obviously a lie. If that line was discovered, then whether they closed the road or not wouldn't have mattered. The Imperial Army would have gotten through. At the time, I didn't know what high-level individuals could do, so I assumed they were telling the truth and let it go, but now that I'm level 8, I know. Their line was never discovered after escaping the capital, and that's why they were able to continue using this base. Impossible. It's preposterous. Arama Steelworker. He truly was looking down on the underground empire. It frustrates me that we never even knew about this. We were playing in the palm of his hand. Dana and Sarah were in sync as if they'd made arrangements beforehand. The more pissed they were, the more aggressively they would fight. Shin Woo nodded his head in satisfaction and said, in any case, that's why, at the time, I hadn't used the line to go to the capital. But now's different. I thought there'd be a facility that controlled access to the line inside. Who? It was really here. You thought this far ahead? Ah, as expected of a hero hand-picked by God. Dana looked at Shin Woo as if she were a love-struck girl. In response, Sarah looked at Dana with a sullen expression and said, I wanted to say this before, but there are a lot more heroes picked by God than just Shin Woo, Dana. But what were you all doing while the hero was doing all this? We were also, I know, popcorn. This is where we eat popcorn, right? Prince, you're really. While they were noisily chatting in the background, Shin Woo carefully looked at the device. Without the steelworker seal, he couldn't even approach it, it was set up that way. What's worse, it couldn't be controlled without Arama Steelworker's seal. But that won't stop me anymore. Shin Woo was level 8 and he had the wildcard skill now. Even if he didn't absorb Arama Steelworker, he was skilled enough to create the right seal, so long as he knew how the device's locking mechanism worked. Honestly, he could make it even easier and just use his shining flame to erase the lock's cause and effect or his dark flame to steal ownership of the device. He could also use his dark shadow to reverse its locked state and open it and had several other methods available to him as well, but he decided to just make the seal. Alright, it really is open. We can go to the capital. Directly. If that's the case, then, now that the capital's defense mechanisms are gone, then we can just take this train and... Yep, we can just ignore their monsters and attack their life points directly. 1. Of course, he didn't mean that they would go right away. He still had lots he needed to prepare, but now he had a reliable way of traveling to the capital whenever he wanted. The final battle, truly is near. It's not going to be the final battle, since some of the undead curse has spread to the surface already. Moreover, the Magic Emperor's no joke, so he can only relax and live in peace once he's out of the picture. The undead curse is affecting the surface. Dana, who was quietly listening to him, scowled. Shin Woo glanced at her, and once he noticed his gaze, she lightly sighed and said, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but killing my father. Killing the Emperor won't completely eliminate the curse. Huh? What do you mean? Are you talking about that source or whatnot? Yes, exactly. Sarah had told him about it before. The reason they were able to mine Evil Eye was because the source of darkness, which had revived the Empire, had been close by. The ore that had been affected by said darkness was already so powerful, so how insanely powerful would the source itself be? It was scary just thinking about it. Why didn't they equip that to the cannon and fire it? They would have been able to break through the barrier that way, right? But that would have destroyed both the underground and the surface. That's just how powerful the source is. And the Emperor already used that to create the undead curse. Thanks for explaining it in a way that I could understand right away. It was truly foolish. He didn't even think about the consequences and just went ahead with it. He used the source of darkness as the base of the undead curse, so the curse itself doesn't weaken. Once the Emperor is killed, Something must be done about the source for the curse to fade away. Shin Woo felt like he'd be able to do something about the source of darkness with his abilities. But he was concerned about something. What if the Emperor decided to use the source against him? He wouldn't do that unless he was crazy, but he was already crazy, so there was still a chance he'd use it. Is that source or whatever always next to the Emperor? Processing it is possible, but it's difficult to move it, even for the Emperor himself. It's probably exactly where I remember it. I see. Well, I guess it'll just work out. He would first get the Emperor and the Lich away from the source. He would kill the Emperor after taking care of the source. Since he had Sarah and Dana on his side, both of which had detailed information on the capital, it shouldn't be too difficult. But the question's how we take care of the two Liches. Let's first think about where their life vessels may be hidden within the capital. No need. The party debated over the final battle, but then, the door opened and a small ice magician entered. Her hands were full of blueprints, which looked pretty cute. Since I found out a way to improve the Huggin's Eye, Kracia declared confidently. Huggin's Eye? That level 8 artifact that they used to sense golems or the undead. He briefly tilted his head, but his eyes soon widened. When the culmination of the surface's magic engineering met with another world's magic, the story, the day before the final battle, would truly commence. To Prince, the Metal Army's base was a safe hiding place, but to Sarah and Dana, it was a place that allowed them to ruminate over their anger. To Shin Woo, it was a golem manufacturing facility, as well as a beachhead that would allow him a direct route to attack the capital. And finally, to Kracia, it was like a treasure vault. As expected, another world's magic engineering's impressive. I see unlimited potential. I'm not so sure, but if you think so, I'm sure it's true. It's been so long since Kracia had last been so energetic. Then again, it made sense. After all, she'd underwent special training in battle magic, so she hadn't had enough time to study anything. But following the battle, she had projects like the Titan or the Huggin's Eye to look forward to, so. Normally, one would loathe an increased workload, but she got excited over it like a pervert. It's a bit upsetting, but people like her probably revolutionize the world, he thought vaguely and finished up all the tasks he needed to do here. He'd only pulled the lever on the far right side, yet he heard a loud noise from afar. Now we can go to the capital whenever we want. I'm getting tense. It's not like we're going right away. If he could, he'd like to reach level 9 before then. Moreover, he wanted to complete the Titan before then as well. If there were a hyperbolic time chamber lying around somewhere, then he'd go in, undergo strict mana training, and reach level 9 no matter what, but it was most unfortunate that he didn't have the time right now. It's all Segald's fault, but it was ultimately you who pulled the trigger, Shin Woo. Giving me the cold, hard truth isn't good for my mental health, so can you not? There was one last thing he needed to find, so he exited the room and perused the other facilities more quickly than before. There was still Rayma's room, as well as a place similar to the command and control center, where all the golem's situation reports were directed to get to. There was also a storehouse filled with emergency use consumable magical devices as well. And, found it. It's really dark. What's the room even for? Don't move. If you set foot into this room without Rayma's seal, a ton of traps will activate. Just how important could it be for the security of this particular room to be even stricter than the command and control center, or the device that remotely controlled the tracks? The party didn't know why they had to, but they followed Shin Woo's instructions and waited outside. Shin Woo used Rayma's seal and then went into the room. At that moment, the once dark room lighted up. It was an extremely small room. Aside from the lights, all that could be seen was a small table, a crystal that lay atop it, and a chair. What kind of treasure is it, for them to go so far to protect it? This isn't a treasure. This is the Empire's most dangerous switch. Switch. Ah, is it? It seems like Dana was the first to realize what it was. Shin Woo strode into the room and placed his hand atop the crystal. As expected, it was a device that would send a signal somewhere through the infusion of mana. Moreover, it used darkness element mana as a foundation to connect you to someone far away. This is a communication device. Moreover, it's a communication line unaffected by the barrier. The reason for it being unaffected by the barrier was extremely simple. This communication device was created by the same person who'd made the barrier. In other words, it was created by the surface's magic emperor. He ignored the others, who widened their eyes, and calmly sat in the chair. What are you doing? Are you going to declare war on the emperor? You dumbass. There's no way I'd do that. Shin Woo scolded Jin and tapped his cheek. With that, his face and armor began to change. It was an unbelievable change, even to those witnessing it firsthand. What's worse, the group couldn't even sense any magic, so they watched dumbfoundedly. Why are you so surprised? I can switch between a human and an undead, so why wouldn't I be able to turn into a golem too? No, your mana presence too. Arama Steelworker. If I hadn't seen this with my own 2 eyes, then I would have thought that Arama Steelworker had returned from the dead. My god, how? When I transformed the chimeras, I received some info on Arama too. With my current abilities, I could imitate him pretty well without it though. At that time, everyone realized what his intentions were. They were just speechless. Shin Woo was trying to do something unbelievable. Shin Woo told his party to remain quiet just in case, and even told them to even stand far away from him. After that, he made sure his disguise was perfect and activated wildcard while sifting through Arama's memories. This skill would conceal any awkwardness of his. Done. He stepped far enough away from the crystal and then infused his mana into it. Shin Woo waited a short while and then, a person's face appeared on the crystal. Someone he couldn't meet no matter what he'd done on the surface. The surface's emperor had appeared. He'd indirectly met the magic emperor before. At the time, the emperor had been controlling the Evil Eye General, Sharina von Hagel, so Shin Woo could recognize him immediately. This was the real deal, the true magic emperor. He wasn't borrowing another person's body this time. He had shown up in his true form. Then again, he supposed there was no reason for the emperor to put up a facade in front of the general he'd sent underground. Arama, your majesty, there was no reason to waste time between them. Arama had served the magic emperor for several years and they shared the same beliefs. They could tell what the other was thinking without even saying it. So there's been a change underground. That's correct. Report, my loyal friend. Yet, Shin Woo was fooling that very emperor. Anti-Skull has made their stand. The exiles were transformed into Anti-Skull and Segald was attempting to break through the barrier. He's an irregular. He's not like a normal undead, the most dangerous type of individual. So, are you saying that he can move forward? Truly? It's truly unbelievable, but... That's correct. I was forced to sacrifice the 4 heavenly commanders to find that out. Shin Woo had figured out how Arama or the Magic Emperor referred to the denizens underground when Kai Paul had absorbed Arama's body and had become an android. He couldn't sift through the memories in any detail, but it was the bare minimum to imitate Arama Steelworker. Segald, a descendant of the Redadanes. A voice filled with profound emotion. He didn't know what else to say, so he remained quiet, but being silent was what Arama Steelworker would do here as well. As one of his vassals, asking about the Emperor's personal feelings was impermissible. How long did he remain silent? The Emperor suddenly spoke. The Redadane family still had that much power left? He must be level 8. Am I right? That's correct, but he uses some unknown power. Flames. Flames that control everything. Flames. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. Shin Woo acted like he hadn't noticed this and raised his voice. That's correct. Flames that could both hide and disguise himself. I've never seen flames like it. If he didn't have such an unusual ability, Stake wouldn't have been killed. I wasn't careful enough. Hides and disguises him. An innate element, Your Majesty? Move forward? Doesn't act like an undead, but acts like a human being? The Emperor was in deep thought. If he acted like he hadn't noticed this as well, then it'd show. Shin Woo questioned and the Emperor asked once more. What else did you find out about him? I was able to steal one of his weapons in exchange for one of my subordinates. It was broken, but we've managed to preserve its shape. But does this hold any significance? Show me. Yes, Your Majesty. Shin Woo showed him the weapon he'd prepared beforehand. What was it, you say? It was a bisected fire dragon scale greatsword. Ha! The Emperor laughed. Ha 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 ha. The room reverberated with his laughter. Your Majesty. Did you figure something out? Yes indeed. I didn't think I'd see him again, but that's where he was. The Emperor raised his voice, as if it would pierce the heavens themselves. The fury and the humiliation in his voice. Shin Woo acted like he couldn't understand, but then widened his eyes as if he'd come to a sudden realization. Your Majesty, is that the surface? That's impossible. Are you saying that he's already gone to the surface? I thought I'd killed him. I was arrogant. I thought he was some foolish hero, but I was wrong. It's been a long time since I've made a mistake like this. He acted like he was dead. A wielder of an innate fire element should have seen through my lightning bind. They wouldn't have been killed so easily. What a show. Redidane. He wasn't raised as the successor of light, but as an entertainer on a stage. The Emperor's voice kept rising and falling. Shin Woo groaned quietly and the Emperor added. There was an individual who rapidly increased his influence with the backing of merchants and religious orders. I assumed he was one of the heroes summoned underground, so I took care of him immediately, but his successor soon appeared, who could wield his power, albeit poorly. I was trying to figure out when I could kill her, but my assumption was wrong. They're nothing more than pawns that were sacrificed by him. Cut the tail. Indeed, Shin Woo presumed. The Emperor gritted his teeth and nodded his head. He moved as he pleased by acting like a muscle-headed hero, but he must have went back underground when he'd gotten all he needed. He left behind such good bait, the religious orders, diverted my attention, and hid himself, acting as though he were dead. How dare that traitor! Your Majesty, if you just give me another chance, I promise to catch him and present his head to you. No, you won't be enough. Shin Woo gritted his teeth and declared. Then, the Emperor stood up. That pale skin and the protruding fangs. He must have sucked blood just recently, as his teeth were stained with blood. I'll send you reinforcements. These lowly peasants don't know their place and weren't satisfied being underground, so they dare bare their fangs at me. Then, I'll just catch them all and crush them. As you wish, Your Majesty. My loyal friend, Urema. Can you figure out where they are? If you just give me a little more time, then I can figure out where they're hiding. Excellent. The day your suffering is at an end and you return to the surface, I'll give you everything you could want. The line went dead. Just in case, he remained in that posture for a little longer. Once he confirmed that the line was dead, he inspected the communication device once more, stepped outside, and closed the door while maintaining Urema's form. Nice. That's one thing off my list. Then, Shin Woo returned to his hero form and smiled refreshingly. Junior, what did you just do? Ah, nothing much. Shin Woo waved his hand and replied. I told you that I was on the surface for a while, right? While I was there, I acted like a hero who could wield flames. But when I met Sigald, I was like, he can wield flames too. So, I thought I could blame Sigald for everything. Is it really that easy? People who aren't at the site of the crime normally take a few clues and come to a conclusion themselves, so if I were to twist those clues around, then it's easy to fool them. Shin Woo had left the surface very subtly. He was caught in a huge explosion, so no one could ascertain whether he had survived or not, and a successor had even appeared soon after. The Magic Emperor had been leery of this. But then he'd met Sigald, the only undead who didn't act like an undead, who could not only use an innate element, but also used a sword as his primary weapon. It would be strange if the Emperor didn't suspect Sigald, and if that happened, it would become easier for him to claim that his words to the Emperor were an act. Though in reality, it was all an act. Well, it would have been annoying to have to worry about both Anti-Skull and the palace. I figured the Magic Emperor could take care of Anti-Skull for us, so I improvised. That was, improvised. I thought everything was planned out from the start. It was obviously improvised. Now that you mention it, I was worried about leaving Jin Jin alone on the surface, but with this, the Emperor won't worry about the religious orders as much. I have to figure out where the Anti-Skull's main base is and tell the Emperor ASAP. Shin Woo hummed as he walked through the corridor. Everyone else was speechless. Kracia, who had been quietly watching him, murmured, "The wicked heaven-defying general. He's so cool." Once he'd finished going through the base and lying to the Magic Emperor, the group gathered in one spot and discussed their future plans. Of their many tasks, they first had to prioritize improving the Huggins Eye, rather than working on golems or the Titan. The reason being quite simple. We need to find out where the Lish's life vessel is, but it's more important that we find out where Sigald is hiding and report it to the Emperor. Whenever you're doing something evil, you're smarter than everyone else, Shin Woo. Hey, People will misunderstand. Call it a way of survival. You think I'm doing this to save myself? I'm doing this so we can all survive. You should have just kept acting as Paul Zero. They'll misunderstand. Ah, I feel a headache coming, so don't explain it. It's fine. Aside from that, they decided what tasks they needed to complete in order to attain victory in the final battle. He decided to focus on improving the Titan, which now used the demon heart, creating cores and golems, and repairing the heaven-defying flagbearer, which had broken to pieces in the previous battle. Unfortunately, Shin Woo was forced to leave all that to Kracia. But Kracia looked happy to be undertaking that massive workload instead. Junior, if Kracia's busy doing other stuff, then what do I do, since I was learning magic from her? Pop some popcorn? Most seniors wouldn't pass this kind of responsibility to their juniors, but that was precisely Prince's charm. She didn't even recognize those norms and did away with them. Shin Woo patted her head in satisfaction. She acted as if she hated it, but she was actually quite pleased. Her image as a senior was completely broken at this point. Seeing that, Kracia looked at her as if she were hopeless and said, "You've got the basics down, so practice by yourself from now on. A real battle would be best." A real battle, huh? Ah, senior, would you like to go to the surface instead? Ah, really? I can go up to the surface? Really? Prince's eyes widened at Shin Woo's suggestion. Shin Woo nodded his head and explained, "The only thing we can do here is invade the capital. It's dangerous outside, so it's difficult to move freely, right? If I'm not traveling with you, then yeah, you're right. I wonder how Lloyd and Arian are doing. Now that you mention it, you're right. If they're hiding in a dungeon, they'll remain safe, but if they leave, I guess I should explain it to them too." The biggest pain in the ass was the heroes not currently present. It was obvious that it would get bloody underground, and if Shin Woo just left the other heroes be, they might die all of a sudden. That's not all. While Lloyd was level 7 and was thus barely qualified to participate in the final battle, Arian would cling to Lloyd like glue, though he at least needed to know how things were going. And if they wanted to fight together in the final battle, then it would be best to stop them. Then can't you just send those two to the surface too, Shin Woo? I thought about that, but I feel like it's not such a good idea. What a coincidence. I agree. Aside from the fact that Arian was an elf, a species unseen on the surface, Lloyd was the model hero who'd show up in fairy tales. If he sent him to the surface, then he'd cause a lot of trouble for him 100%. He might even die faster there than if he were here. Then I'll leave them be for now. I'll explain things to them later. Senior Prince, please think about it. If you decide to go to the surface, then I can have Jin help, or I can help you do things on your own. I've identified several dungeons, and going to the surface is best if you're looking for rapid growth. Junior, but if you catch the Emperor's attention, then you will die. He's level 9. Junior, Prince was tearing up but ultimately decided to go to the surface. If she wanted to get used to the new fire demon summoning spell that she'd developed with Kracia and grow, then going to the surface was the best option. There was honestly only one viable option for her. You're not planning on invading the capital without me, are you? Right? You saw how strong my fire demon was, right? Yes, I promise I'll go with you when the time comes, so please don't die. More importantly, how many of the 12 generals are left? I have an idea, but first, Shin Woo, could you please tell us about all the members of the 12 generals you've killed thus far? This time it was Sarah. Shin Woo thought back and went down the list one by one. Sarah and the others were absolutely speechless. To think you killed 5 of them yourself. I had my suspicions, but you really were the one who killed the beast general. I thought it was strange that the loot was so sparse. Of course, you should be thankful that I let you finish off the vulture general. Though I was busy rescuing Lloyd and taking care of Ethan Cruz. Do you guys even realize how close you all were to turning undead then? Junior, are you some sort of fairy tale protagonist? You do all the dirty work and protect everyone. That's pretty cool. Sarah had ended up killing the vulture general, but if Shin Woo and Kracia hadn't prepared their countermeasures so thoroughly, then the fight would have been a lot tougher. Normally, Sarah shouldn't have had any trouble taking down a level 7 general by herself, but at the time, she'd been affected by madness, so he didn't know how it would have actually turned out. And as you know, the spirit general's on our side now. Who? That means that you actually defeated 7 of the 12 generals. Moreover, you were able to defeat my brother, Sagald, and the Archmage as well. She looked like she couldn't believe what she was saying. As humans grew, their karma became personalized to them, which causes them to have certain affinities and weaknesses. The 12 generals' abilities varied, so even if you managed to defeat one of them, it also meant that you would likely struggle against another. But it sounded like Shin Woo wouldn't lose in a one-on-one confrontation with any one of them. And now that I think about it, you're actually undead, not human. Hey, don't forget about the horse. I'm surprised that the mercenary king, Metoffel, had reached level 8. If you include him as well, then you've defeated 3 level 8 generals and have taken one on as your subordinate. I didn't finish off Arama myself, but I guess that's about right. Moreover, Shin Woo had begun hunting the 12 generals ever since he was level 6. Shin Woo explained that he had acquired the heaven-defying general title himself, and after explaining his achievements, the group had no choice but to acknowledge it. Higher-level foes were stronger than you. That was a basic principle in this world. Yet, Shin Woo had ignored that basic principle, so there was no title that fit him better than heaven-defying. But I heard the Emperor appoints the 12 generals himself? I heard the Emperor could bolster the 12 generals' ranks by appointing candidates. I believe it's a type of darkness magic that uses the source of darkness. He forcibly bestows the title onto them, which strengthens their karma. That's how he makes them even stronger. However, there's a limit to this as well. Sarah briefly explained how the 12 generals were appointed. The Magic Emperor used his own magic to appoint his own 12 generals. In other words, he couldn't bolster the 12 generals' ranks as much as he wanted, and then continued onto the main topic. Normally, level 7 or level 8 individuals don't come out of thin air. The reason the heroes here are so powerful is because they were picked based on their inherent talent. And the fact that so many of your subordinates are level 7 or higher is something that even I cannot explain, though it likely has something to do with your ability, Shin Woo. So, there's no one like that in the capital? There should be some level 7s in the capital, but I'm absolutely sure that there aren't any level 8s there. If they had other level 8s, then there wouldn't have been any level 7 generals in the first place. That made sense, since the 12 generals were the Empire's 12 strongest. Sarah continued on. Those level 7s are weaker than the original 12 generals, so even if they were to replace them, they would ultimately be much weaker than the generals you've killed thus far. In other words, they aren't a threat. There's a chance that the 12 general candidates grew. Never mind. The only reason Metoffel Raredon was able to grow was because he was an elite ghoul with the ability to eat others. That, as well as other miracles intertwined, allowing him to reach level 8, but the chance that that would happen to the others was extremely low. We only need to worry about the level 8-12 generals. The others aren't worth talking about, so you can just ignore them. I see. First, the Archmage survived. I'm not sure what Sagald's position is, but I do know that at that moment, he's not on the Emperor's side. If that's the case, then there's only one person left. The last of the Empire's 4 heavenly commanders, the heaven-sundering general, Leofield von Terriman. Duke Terriman? Dana murmured. Shin Woo furrowed his brow, as he felt like he'd heard that name before. He remembered. It was from a memory fragment he gained long ago. The owner of the first memories I absorbed. In other words, a level 1 skeleton learned spearmanship from Leofield. That sounds right, since he created the spearmanship that the army uses. It's not an exaggeration to say that the entire army uses his spearmanship. Technically, he had learned the basics of how to fight from Leofield. Shin Woo grinned at the strange connection, but Dana sported a serious expression and said, "But his own spearmanship is far greater than the soldier's, hero." Was she scared just remembering him? Dana was shaking. He specializes in mass murder and was monstrous enough to be able to overwhelm the Annihilation Flame Sword God in a one-on-one confrontation. He's definitely human, but he's big enough that he makes you wonder whether he has giant's blood mixed in his veins or not. And this is the most important part. He's a complete musclehead, so you can't reason with him. He might even be dumber than most undead. Dana, you only compare 2 things when they're somewhat similar. That man doesn't even have a brain. He doesn't listen to anyone aside from the Emperor. He's just a combat machine. But he's still one of the 4 heavenly commanders, huh? Since he's extremely strong, His spearmanship, which is reinforced by his almost fully mastered wind element, can cut through anything. The other 4 heavenly commanders avoided fighting him head-on. If I had to pick one person in the Empire who's mastered martial arts, then I'd have to pick between Sigald von Rededane and Leofield von Terriman. But I'd ultimately pick Leofield. You must be wary of this man. He's one of the few people that can ruin your plans with just pure strength alone. Sarah and Dana were in agreement and voiced their concerns regarding the last of the 4 heavenly commanders. However, Shin Woo just shrugged his shoulders after listening to them. I feel like I'll be able to kill him quite easily. Avoid fighting him head-on at all costs. I know how great your combat skills and your other abilities are, but you cannot beat him in close combat, hero. You should instead attack him from a distance. Throw those exploding weapons at him. No, he might just cut through those explosions. I don't think that's the issue here. It's fine. Just keep explaining the capital's forces and its facilities. Dana stared at Shin Woo as if she were worried about him, but the other women beside her, including Sarah, looked at her in displeasure, so she was forced to back off immediately. Shin Woo was more afraid of this situation than the heaven-sundering general. But he didn't say anything so he could make it out of this alive. An hour passed, and when they were about done, Shin Woo looked over the map, which he'd made with Dana and Sarah's help, and nodded his head. This looks about right. You're quite good at drawing too, hero. Because it had been dozens of years since Dana or Sarah had last been to the capital, there was no guarantee that their knowledge was reliable. However, once he heard their explanation regarding the capital, he pretty much knew how he should move from then on. The structure's a lot simpler than Byron, which had traps everywhere. All we need to know is where the fortifications are, where the troops are stationed, and where the palace is. Oh, the source of darkness is beneath the palace. Then he pretty much does leave it right next to him. Dana told you that already. That the source of darkness couldn't be moved. So the Emperor just moved right next to it. How valuable was it for him to do such a thing? He wanted to monopolize it. Since it's a treasure that made the underground, which was originally nothing more than a slightly large prison, into an empire, and so the Emperor wouldn't have wanted it to leave his side. As I thought. Maintaining an empire this size is abnormal, huh? Of course it is. It'd be impossible with even the surface's magic engineering. So why is that source thing here? Why exactly did such a treasure lay dormant underground? What, did they try to destroy it, but were met by a level 10 dragon or something? No, probably not. Shin Woo grumbled and Dana smiled. Of course not. It's just a huge, everlasting mass of pure energy. Some say it's a relic left behind during the Age of Gods, before civilization even began. We cannot identify the origins of many level 7 artifacts and up. Please look at it that way. The dungeon's loot does seem kind of out of place. Shin Woo was sure of something. The source of darkness, there was something behind it. Something that was a pain in the ass. However, there was no point in worrying about that now, so he decided to worry about it later. Getting the Emperor and the Lich away from the source of darkness took priority. The remaining problem is, we need to figure out where exactly the train will take us in the capital. You can just sacrifice one of your pals. That's a bit. How about I use a golem instead? He was reluctant to sacrifice one of the pals, as they'd regained a part of their human selves. Shin Woo instead decided to sacrifice one of the remaining level 4 bronze golems in his golem squad. Alright, we've gone over the main issues. Let's do it as we've discussed. I'll take Senior Prince to the surface right now. Oh, and Dana, you come to the surface too. I'd like to be with you, hero, but, is this perhaps related to what you were talking about before? Yep. Shin Woo grinned, seeing Dana's eyes gleam with excitement, and said exactly what she wanted to hear. I'll introduce you to the spirits on the surface. You're plenty strong already, but an elementalist needs their spirits. Thank you so much, hero. As expected, it was easy to convince her when spirits were involved. The spirits of Byron had been sacrificed over several years, and she had essentially been the one to kill them, but perhaps that was why she wanted to meet living spirits so much. I'll take these two to the surface and take a look around, so you guys can all just rest. Shin Woo stopped partway. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like they'd just stay put and rest. Everyone, including Kracia, looked at him, intent on going to the surface. He supposed it only made sense. They had lived underground for so many years, so how could they not want to see the surface? But why was it that he felt that that wasn't the only reason? And why did the back of his head sting so much? Are you guys fighting something I'm not aware of? Are you fighting something somewhere else? Probably a fight over love. Krasia, you're actually Korean, aren't you? Shin Woo ultimately sighed and was forced to take all of them to the surface. Since they were so physically and mentally fatigued from the last battle, he was going to let them rest for a day or two anyway, so it wouldn't be problematic to his schedule. Plus, the Heaven Door's key required much fewer bones and mana than before. It really is the night sky. With the Heaven Door's key, an unbelievable high-rank artifact, they could easily ignore the barrier and cross over to the surface. The party arrived in a quiet forest near the capital and were speechless for a time. A city filled with life, as well as a natural sky with the moon and stars. No matter how much they looked, the party remained mesmerized by the abundance of life. Ah, I remember us being like this when we first got here too. To think we'd be able to come to the surface so easily. There was an artifact that could easily break through the barrier like this. My father is truly pitiful. Yeah, instead of developing the undead curse, he could have just gone around killing Steves instead. It would have been a lot simpler. Steve? He's a great guy in the neighborhood who always leaves something for me whenever I see him. Shin Woo waited for them to calm down and then led them into the capital. Rem accessed the golem network, allowing them to use a path with no one around, so no one noticed them. After the Emperor had torched his house, the Lawrence shop in Yijin, she was operating under the alias, Izuna on the surface, moved closer to the sun god religion. Of course, that location was reported to Shin Woo beforehand. This must be it. It's quite grand. You normally can't enter this part of the capital with just money. How many months did this take you to procure? It's not all that great. Since we're publicly antagonizing the Emperor. To be more specific, he and the Emperor had opposing opinions of what was happening on the surface. Just that would draw the Emperor's attention, but Shin Woo hoped his little trick would divert the Emperor's attention. Mr. Shin Woo, it's been a while. Once she was quietly informed of his arrival, the front gate opened and Yijin came bursting out. She looked around, ensuring that the Emperor wasn't watching, and then jumped into his arms, repeatedly kissing his cheek. Yijin was wearing the phoenix's feather even when she wasn't fighting, just like she'd been told. I'm so glad you're safe. I missed you. I'm more glad that you're safe. Good job. As I thought. TCH. How vulgar. Seeing that, his party passed judgment and looked at her maliciously. He really couldn't take this. The mood was stifling. He pretty much knew what they were thinking, but it was precisely because he knew that he couldn't understand why they were reacting like this. Shin Woo thought that he'd have to somehow resolve this issue soon, but then Yijin's blush intensified and she dropped a bombshell. You're going to sleep over today, right? Right? TCH. So vulgar. Oh my, isn't that Ms. Redadane's voice? And who is this extremely beautiful lady? Ah, even Senior Prince is here? Only then did Yijin notice his party and tilt her head. The women didn't even introduce themselves and continuously glared at Yijin. Shin Woo sighed at the idiotic situation and then said, "For now, let's just go in. I'll explain everything. Actually, there are some things that I won't be able to explain to you." I suppose that's true. You're truly a sinful man, hero. And thus, his relationship with Yijin was revealed to all. His relationship with her had also caused the mood to worsen. Thus far, Shin Woo had never formed a relationship with a woman unless it was strictly necessary, so he really wasn't good at being considerate of other people's feelings. He couldn't help but acknowledge that flaw of his. When you really think about it, that's why I had that issue with Jin. He hadn't matured at all. Shin Woo made small talk, but the mood didn't improve. He clicked his tongue and thought about it. His only ally in this situation, Prince, just patted his shoulder. I guess you're in the same ship as Lloyd. I'm just glad you finally noticed. That feels really humiliating. Aren't they in the wrong, not me? He'd only known Dana for a day, and it wouldn't surprise him if Sarah hated him as if he were her worst enemy. Shin Woo couldn't understand these two at all, the two responsible for the current atmosphere. However, Prince just laughed at him, which frustrated him to no end, and dismissed him. Life's not rational, Junior. Damn it, how could you of all people say something like that? Hey, what did you just say? This idiot Senior said something wise, which only further pissed him off. Prince then gave some more advice to the grumbling Shin Woo. Why don't you just marry all of them? You can just propose to them after the bottle's over. Could you please not say something so ominous? I'm not planning on starting a family yet. Shin Woo immediately shot her down. He saw the women fighting amongst each other with their words, and just sighed and said, Jin, how's the religious order nowadays? Pardon? Ah, the religious order. He couldn't let them fight any longer when there were more important matters at hand. Jin noticed this immediately, as she looked at him and said, They're fighting well, Mr. Shin Woo. Or the hero K's death caused the factions that oppose the Emperor's rule to increase in strength. And they're constantly finding traces of the undead or death energy doing significant damage to the Empire, so the Sun God religion, which is at the forefront, is getting a lot of support. What about you? His question embarrassed Jin a bit. I got a bit famous since we went with the concept of a female knight enraged over her lover's death. No, I might have gotten more famous than the hero K. Good. That's what successful marketing is all about. What about Bisher Moon? He's still fighting against the vampires. Sometimes I help out, but there's only so much I can do at night. An opportunity will present itself soon enough. An opportunity? Yeah, the Emperor said he'd send reinforcements. Who would he send? He'd obviously send undead who could freely traverse through the underground empire. If that's the case, he would definitely send the vampires from the Red Moon. They were reinforcements to fight Sigald. The reinforcements should be substantial, and if so many forces were sent underground, then it would make it easier for Bisher Moon. But that wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. The enemy on the surface, and the enemy underground. He needed an opportunity to kill both of them. And that opportunity, if I can kill some of the 12 generals, then the stage will be set. What are you planning? What else would a performer be thinking about besides his stage? Following Shin Woo's reunion with Jin looked at him more sharply than before and retorted. Shin Woo just shrugged his shoulders, replied, and turned around. He was done assessing the situation. There was only one thing left to do. Dana, enough with the nonsense and follow me. I'll introduce you to the spirits. Chapter 49. Arranging the stage. Shin Woo let the others rest. Unlike before, the women complied, but considering the fact that Jin was shooting some kind of SOS signal, something must have gone down, and went to the Spirit's Spring with Dana. They were able to arrive quickly with the use of the Heaven Door's key. This is the Spirit's Spring. The real Spirit's Spring. The Spirit's Spring, I see, this truly is. The moment they entered, Dana realized that this was what she'd been looking for. The undead Emperor had tricked her into thinking that they were creating a paradise for the spirits, a place where they could relax and put them at ease. But this was the true Spirit's Spring. To think it existed on the surface. Ah, the contractor has arrived. It's been a while, contractor. You've gotten even stronger. I'm always ready to fight. Someone tell her that he's here. The person she's been waiting for has come. The spirits of the Spirit's Spring greeted him somewhat differently from the dryads in the wine factory. The dryads treated him as if he were their lover, their husband, or their father, but these spirits treated Shin Woo as if he were their boss. Contractor, you're contracted with this many spirits? Now that I think about it, I feel a faint connection between you and these spirits. Dana quickly noticed. How could he have formed a contract with several thousand spirits? She looked on in disbelief, but as she observed the spirits, she realized something even more astounding. No, wait, that's not it. Hero, did you form a contract with this entire space? You, an elementalist, catch on quick. You're right, I've formed a contract with this space, the Spirit's Spring itself to be exact. It's less effective than forming a contract individually with each and every spirit, but it's still a win-win. To think that was possible. She knew that Shin Woo had done some amazing things, but of those achievements, this was the most surprising. Of course, she was already surprised about the fact that the Spirit's Spring even existed in the first place. But then, that girl is, in terms of being an elementalist, she's better than the contractor. Who exactly did the contractor bring? Oh my god, the spirits trickled in, one or two at a time, to greet Shin Woo, but soon realized how skilled his companion was and were shocked. It was only natural. After all, she was the Underground Empire's greatest elementalist. Shin Woo was highly skilled in forming contracts rather than being an elementalist, while Dana's ability to draw spirits to her was unmatched. The Emperor had bedded the most powerful of the exiled elementalists, creating Dana in the process. She was born with high magic and a strong affinity with spirits. It was only natural that she would be loved by spirits. Moreover, by transforming her into an immortal, she had gained the ability to use the darkness element. This allowed her to more easily form contracts with spirits. It's nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Dana. A peculiar energy. She's not human, but something else. She's like us spirits. The contractor did something to her. If that's the case, then she is like us. Come in, friend of the spirits. We'll take you inside. The spirits immediately swarmed Dana. Dana didn't know what to do and looked at Shin Woo. He looked at her kindly and nodded his head. Go ahead and follow them. Since that was my intention from the very beginning. Hero, I understand. Then, please excuse me for a bit. Dana bowed at Shin Woo while looking overjoyed and went inside the cave with the spirits. Once he'd given her away to the spirits, the elder dryad Princess Sinia appeared behind him and hugged him. It felt like she was hugging him tighter than normal. Maybe he was imagining things. Paul Zero. Who's that pretty lady? I smell your scent on her. Sinia, not you too. I'm getting tired of it. Sorry. That wasn't my intention. Are you tired? Come here, I'll give you a lap pillow. While Dana was enjoying herself with the spirits, Shin Woo rested on Sinia's lap. Her soft and refreshing scent really made him want to unwind and just keep resting. Of course, he didn't come here just to rest. He was able to assess the state of the spirits here through Sinia, who had taken over command of the Spirit Spring as Zenon was still outside traveling with Yi Jin Jin. And he also briefly explained his plans from now on. Will it go well? They're really strong. If the stage is set properly. I'm preparing just in case that doesn't go well, so don't worry. All you need to do is do your best. I'm ready to whatever you need me to do, Paul Zero. I'm just worried about you. That's why I'm preparing so much. And, Shin Woo pointed at Dana, who was chatting and laughing along with the spirits. She's a good person. I'm not good enough to command the spirits of the Spirit Spring, but Dana should be able to draw more power from them than normal. Are you going to make her form a contract with the Spring? Yeah, Shin Woo's contract with the Spirit Spring was very irregular. However, something that happened once could happen again. Thus, Shin Woo would personally connect Dana, the princess who was universally beloved by spirits, and the Spirits Spring together, allowing her to control the power of the spirits here. He had enough on his plate already, so it wasn't a good idea for him to command the spirits as well. So Dana's timing couldn't be better, as she had a strong affinity with spirits. It can't be helped, I suppose. She seems capable of commanding the Spirits Spring too. If we add her power into the mix, then the spirits should no longer have to fear the undead curse. Since that's the base of her species. Paul Zero, you did something incredible somewhere else again, didn't you? I'll start telling you now. Oh my, who? Shin Woo noticed that Dana wouldn't be free of the spirits for a while, so he drew Sinia towards him. She obviously didn't resist. That sweet repose lasted another hour. Will I really be able to do it? Think of it in more simple terms. I've already formed a contract with the Spirits Spring, and I've formed a contract with you as well. It'll be easy to form a contract between you two. I'll form a contract with the Spirits Spring. Me? After he'd explained everything to her, Dana looked around the Spirits Spring with bright eyes. He thought she would jump at the opportunity, but she seemed more deeply moved than he'd expected. It felt like she could survive off spirits, rather than 3 meals a day. I see. So I will command this place together with you, hero. I'm here too. Take care of me, Dana. Kook. Dana briefly glared at Sinia, who was still clinging onto Shin Woo, but she still couldn't give up the opportunity that Shin Woo was giving her. On the contrary, all right, I'll be in your care. She's acting strange too. Why am I surrounded by weirdos? She'd already made up her mind, so no matter how many rivals she had, she wouldn't lose. Dana shook Sinia's outstretched hand. At that moment, the Spirits Spring reacted to her and began to brighten. The spirits within the spirit's spring did the same. The spirit's spring is growing. She's a descendant of one of the exiled elementalists. We need to embrace her. We're so thankful that she came to lead us. The spirit's spring is so happy. The traces of the past contractors within her are resonating with us. In a way, they were a lot happier than when Shin Woo had formed a contract with them. He watched on unhappily. The light intensified and was eventually absorbed by Dana. She began to open her eyes slowly. Her golden eyes showed more life in them than before, radiating with various elements and magic. It's been a long time since I felt like this. I didn't think a day like this would come. It's all because of you, hero. You so easily gave me back everything that I'd lost. It's a coincidence. My ability was just good. Hero. Shin Woo answered brusquely and realized that perhaps this was the core reason as to why she liked him so much. If she were alone, he would have accepted her without hesitation. Well, that's that. Since it's best if I leave her like this for now. He knew that human emotion could yield immeasurable power. Of course, Shin Woo wasn't going to just leave them, the women, like this. He couldn't understand why they liked him so much, but since they did, he could stimulate those emotions and use them to help them survive and kill the magic and undead emperors. In the process, he'd have to go through the trouble of taking care of any improper emotions, but he could deal with that later so long as they could make it through the battle. That was Shin Woo's true intentions. Shin Woo had such a Joker-esque thought, but soon realized that Dana and all the spirits were staring at him. Cinia had probably explained his plans to them. He nodded his head and said, "The time for your revenge is nigh. Did you hear? The spirits underground were sacrificed in vain. You have no allies underground nor on the surface. Ultimately, you have to save yourselves. It's almost time. You must create a place where you can live with your descendants yourselves. Can you do it? Of course. I've been waiting for you to say that. I'll cultivate a place like this, so that spirits like us can live peacefully, even if I have to risk my own life to do so." Good. Then break it up. Prepare yourselves. After he'd formed a contract between Dana and the Spirit's Spring, Shin Woo parted ways with Cinia, who was weeping and clinging onto him, and returned to his house. The ragged Yi Jin Jin and the other angry women greeted him. "Did you guys fight? We just drank some tea. Would you like some too? It's not some radioactive tea or something, is it? Huke, Mr. Shin Woo. 1. It was such a relief that Cinia wasn't here too. Yi Jin Jin hugged him and he began comforting her. This situation was ridiculous. If he slept with her, that anger of theirs would probably spread to him as well, but he couldn't leave a customer unhappy. Plus, he'd have to increase her burden in the future. Then, rest up. I have something else I have to talk to Yi Jin Jin about." "Something to talk about? Are you really just going to talk?" "No, I'm going to do other stuff too." "Kook, this is why men are a bad man. So cool." That night, Shin Woo explained what would happen soon, as well as what she would have to do on the surface. Not only had she risen to level 7, she'd also grown immensely in such a short time, so she was definitely qualified to handle things here. Yi Jin Jin couldn't readily believe what he was saying, but she ultimately nodded her head. The edge of the javelin he'd given her was still sharp. "Junior, I'll do my best here. I really like the sun god religion. It's great that you like them and all, but please be wary of the Pope. After all, he covets talented people." Prince impersonated a priest of the sun god religion, and Dana temporarily stayed in the Spirit's Spring to get familiar with the spirits there. Now, he was done with everything he needed to do here. The next day, the party did some light shopping and then returned underground. "It's tough. Did you ever think it'd be easy?" Shin Woo and Kraisha returned to the underground empire and immediately went to work on improving the Huggins Eye. Although Kraisha had found the documents, which acted as the catalyst, when they actually tried to apply that information, they encountered several problems. "If we fail, the artifact's done for. The difficulty's too high. Even if this one breaks, there might be another one out there, right? Do you want me to break it?" "No, my bad." The magical engineering theory that Kraisha had proposed was much too difficult for Shin Woo to understand. He'd managed to recreate the Steelworker seal and created never-before-seen artifacts in the past, so it wouldn't be strange if he were to receive the Magic Engineer title. However, that was all brought about by his intuition, as well as his mana sense. He specialized in practical application rather than theory. That mana sense is important. If I do something wrong, then you should be able to fix it, Shin Woo. Yeah, I already know you need me. Let's finish up. We need to kill those liches, but finding Sigald takes precedence. He'd given the rest of his party jobs to do while he and Kratia were improving the Huggins Eye. Sarah, who had accepted her status as an undead banshee, was getting used to her banshee abilities, as well as the darkness element she'd inherited from Shin Woo. Whereas Jin had only one job to do regardless of whether she'd gotten to level 8 or acquired the light element, and that was running. Of course, it wasn't just running. She would run using every skill and ability she had. She just ran and ran, like a madwoman. She just kept running, even though it seemed like she may not be able to run any faster. At their levels, rather than focusing on hunting a monster or two, it was much more effective to get used to their own abilities. Alright, I think it's possible. No, it'll definitely work. And thus, 3 days passed. Kratia's eyes shined on the dawn of the 4th day. She and Shin Woo had formed and discarded over 30 hypotheses, but at the end of that all, she said, if we can imitate the target's mana, then we can find them. We can make it like that. Ah, you got that from the golem's basic abilities. It was hard to adapt it to the Huggins Eye. But it'll work now. Let's begin. Kratia had mapped out the design, but improving it was actually Shin Woo's job. He was able to modify the Huggins Eye with his disguise and wildcard skills, as well as his darkness element. Soon, Kratia stretched her hand towards Shin Woo, but he stopped her. Wait a sec, let's set up some insurance first. By insurance, he meant Dark Shadow. Even if they messed up the adjustment, with Dark Shadow's ability to reverse cause and effect, they would be able to return it to its original state. That's the time element. What are you talking about? It's different. It's merely changing a damaged state to an undamaged state. I can't understand what you're saying. What's an innate element, and what's a fusion element? It goes beyond all logic. Only a small handful of people had ever attained innate elements, so it was only natural that Kratia couldn't comprehend them. Shin Woo smiled bitterly and used Dark Shadow to ensure that he had saved the image of the undamaged Huggins Eye. With this, he reduced any delay in the reversal as much as possible, and he could reverse any mistake as soon as he detected it. This had only become possible because the Dark Shadow element had leveled up to the intermediate level. Then, let's start for real. We probably won't have to use our insurance. I trust you. Shin Woo and Kratia grabbed each other's hand. He established a connection with her using the darkness element, causing the image in her head to clearly show in his eyes. The connection was secure. Shin Woo now understood the image and grabbed the Huggins Eye with his free hand. Shall we begin? It felt like he'd become a surgeon in the operating room, as the sharply refined mana burst forth and Wildcard's influence intensified. He began modifying the artifact. He'd practiced a few times already, so the image relayed from Kratia was incredibly clear, and her thoughts were also indirectly relayed. Thus, it made it easier for him to modify the artifact. Good. There are no problems. Everything went so smoothly that he actually felt worried. Moreover, his mana sense had instinctively found the right path, and so he began to infuse his mana into the Huggins Eye. The route was a bit different from what Kratia had first suggested. Kratia was briefly startled but soon created a new magic formula on the spot. Shin Woo nodded his head and continued to infuse his mana into it. And so, the artifact evolved. They couldn't say a thing, but their emotions ran wild at each and every moment. If the mana lost its place, then the artifact would explode. If he responded a second too late, then the level 8 artifact would crumble into nothingness. Cute, but it would be fine now. He could feel it. This was Shin Woo's intuition talking. He was creating a new artifact that would find whomever he wanted, and pursue every trace of mana that existed within this world. The Archmage had exhausted every means available to him to create this supreme artifact, but with the collaboration of two young geniuses, the Huggins Eye was reaching a realm even beyond that. The Archmage would probably have no idea that this item would eventually become the noose around his neck. An artifact that can categorize mana, can divide the strands into more detail, can affect a large area, and can pick out a specific target. Something that can pick up information from anywhere that's affected by mana, like Odin's Raven. At some point, the current of mana being infused ceased. Shin Woo took a deep breath and carefully placed it on the table. As if waiting for him to place it down, light surged from the artifact, and it began to suck in the atmospheric mana like a vacuum. We succeeded, yeah, the artifact's crazily sucking in the surrounding mana, which means, Kraisha said silently, and Shin Woo likewise lowered his voice. Kraisha didn't show her emotions often, though she tended to show them quite often nowadays, but looked quite happy and gripped Shin Woo's hand tightly while still being connected. The LV8 Huggins Eye has acquired suitable karma and is evolving. You have acquired the LV9 Mana Radar. Shin Woo? No, it's nothing. Shin Woo picked up the new level 9 artifact and felt dissatisfied. It had such a cool name before, so why did it change into such an intuitive one? Of course, this was all Shin Woo's fault. As the one that modified the item, Shin Woo's thoughts had caused an extreme change in the artifact, causing it to become a reflection of his subconscious will. Shin Woo didn't know what to think. He stared at the Mana Radar but ultimately grabbed it, and was shocked. This is more amazing than my wildest imagination. First, its search range. It had a huge range when it was a level 8 artifact, but now that it had leveled up, its range could cover the entire underground empire. That quality was enough to prove that it was a level 9 artifact, but what was even more shocking was its primary function. By categorizing the target and subdividing them, the user could figure out everything there was to know about a target they'd met once or someone who had a deep connection to mana. This can find anything. There's nothing it can't find. What's worse, even if it's an artifact. Yeah, it really is amazing. The result of adding our power to the surface and underground's magic engineering. They had, unbeknownst to the magic or undead emperors, combined the surface and underground's techniques to create such a divine artifact. Would they ever become aware of this fact? Though the two had become easier to kill because of that, you have created a level 9 artifact with the help of a talented comrade. Though it was originally a level 8 artifact, you fused together the knowledge of several worlds and civilizations in order to develop it one step further. These techniques are so impressive that it is difficult to appraise them. You have acquired the title, God's Hand. All stats have increased by 50. The chance that you create a high-quality item increases. He'd been expecting a message like this. Kraisha was rewarded as well this time. The two briefly enjoyed the status bonuses. But the most welcoming news was that his recently acquired title would make the rest of his tasks easier. Then, Shin Woo, let's move on to the next thing. A titan equipped with the demon heart. I'm really excited. There's something I need to do before that. Wait just a little bit. TCH. Shin Woo entered Segald's mana into the Mana Radar. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't have understood Segald's annihilation flame, even if they experienced it firsthand. However, Shin Woo already had 3 innate elements, and had temporarily stolen the annihilation flame with his dark flame. Perfectly imitating Segald's mana pattern wasn't impossible for him. But why is it acting like this? What's wrong, Shin Woo? It's just that there's no way he's here. Shin Woo couldn't believe his eyes and shook the level 9 Mana Radar around. In Korea, he'd learned to hit things when they didn't work to get them working again, but he suppressed that urge, as he didn't want to damage such a precious artifact. It wasn't a level 9 artifact for nothing. No matter how many times he tried the search, the result was the same. So long as there wasn't a fundamental issue with the artifact itself, there was no way the information would be wrong. Do you know where this is? Just a minute, I'm not familiar with these coordinates. Let me look through your memories. Yeah, I know where it is. Soon, Kraisha understood why he was reacting like that and sported a peculiar expression. Who else could understand the absurdity of this all besides her? This bastard, he really is on the surface. Now I know why he was never caught. That's right, he didn't know how long he'd been there, but the anti-Skulls leader, Segald von Rededane, was on the surface. Shin Woo, didn't you say that the Magic Emperor oversees the Golem network? So then how did Segald get up there undetected? Segald has his annihilation flame. Maybe he used that to mess with the Golem network. Is that even possible? Innate elements make it possible. In layman's terms, they're like hockey in one piece. In the first half, the characters fought with their devil fruit and their abilities, but in the latter half, they added hockey, which completely ruined the power balance. I'm not sure I understand, but I get that it's a cheat. There was also a high chance that he used Annihilation Flame to pass through the barrier. The barrier, which doesn't allow any living being to pass through it, wasn't just some conceptual barrier, but also acted as a physical and magical barricade. If the barrier was destroyed, then the Emperor would surely know. So the fact that the Emperor didn't know that Sigald was here meant that he'd used his Annihilation Flame to erase his and his subordinates' presences to pass through the barrier undetected. It really was an overpowered ability. I can't understand it logically. It's not a power that makes logical sense. Comparing innate elements and determining which one was better was laughable, but Shin Woo really felt that the Annihilation Flame was incredibly powerful. Sigald's Annihilation Flame was more powerful than the Emperor's Lightning Bind. Most importantly was the fact that the Emperor wasn't always using his Lightning Bind to control the Golem network. If that's the case, then it would be stranger if Sigald had been found. It's possible. He might already be forming a bridgehead to invade the surface. Like what you did by acting like a hero and hiding the fact that you were undead, Shin Woo. No, there wasn't anyone suspicious in the Empire besides me. No matter how amazing the Annihilation Flame is, it wouldn't allow him to act perfectly like me. He, as well as his subordinates, wouldn't have been able to hide in plain sight. Then, he's probably in a dungeon. The citizens of the Empire resented the Empire for neglecting the dungeons that endangered them. It's entirely possible that Sigald had found an abandoned dungeon and transformed it into his base. No, if the surface's sewers had been converted into secret facilities like the undergrounds, then there was a chance that he could even be in the capital at this very moment. What a vicious bastard, to think he was already preparing himself for an invasion of the surface. Shin Woo, you're smiling. I can't help it. By learning of Sigald's plan beforehand, he would be able to turn things in his favor. Kracia watched him and gave a silent prayer. Annihilation Flame Sword God, it was truly the perfect plan. It's unfortunate you had to meet Shin Woo. All plans look perfect until you figure them out. Shin Woo recorded Sigald's location and reported it to the Emperor through the communication device. Once he did so, the Emperor was furious beyond belief. The surface. You're saying that that lowly undead fooled me. How dare he trick me? I'm 100% certain. He's confusing us by quickly moving between the surface and the underground. That's why my report was late. I had no idea that he could return to the surface. Grr. Shin Woo could hear the Emperor grinding his teeth. The angrier he got, the easier it became for Shin Woo to trick him, so there was nothing better for him. I got it, Arama, you did well. You brought this to my attention before it was too late and I won't forget it. Now that I know he's here, there's no one that can stop me from punishing him. It's an honor, Your Majesty. Some of his forces must still be underground. That works in our favor. A few of the 12 generals have finished their training, so finish off the rest of Anti-Skull with their help. We can't let them provoke Jizahenu no matter what. Don't let them even think about coming to the surface. Do you understand? I understand, Your Majesty. As he thought, the Magic Emperor was indeed afraid of the undead Emperor, Jizahenu. It was only natural. Jizahenu had studied magic like a madman for hundreds of years, all in order to take his revenge, and was also level 9. If the Magic Emperor was truly afraid, then Shin Woo thought about it, but first bowed his head deeply before the Emperor. As you wish, Your Majesty. They'll arrive shortly. Don't let any of them get away. Of course, Your Majesty. The line went dead. Shin Woo left the room and released the Arama disguise, sporting an even larger smile than before. Soon what? Geez, you surprised me. Just a second ago, there was definitely nothing there, but Jin suddenly appeared before him, raking the air with her hooves. Shin Woo took a step back in shock and Jin spoke boastingly. No matter how good your perception range is, or how fast your reflexes are, it's impossible for you to react when someone instantly closes the distance from outside of that range, right? I'm more surprised about how nonchalant you are about doing it. I almost have a full grasp on my speed. Now all that's left is you getting on and getting used to it too. No, wait, he couldn't keep up with her speed, yes, but Wildcard was always active and had a huge range, so if she were able to fool even him, then, in a way, she had done something even more surprising than the likes of innate elements like Annihilation Flame or Shining Flame. Shin Woo gazed at Jin, who snorted boastfully and looked at him doubtfully. It didn't happen nowadays, but looking at her now, so confident, reminded him of the time when he'd had to get used to her speed. Do I really have to? It's okay. Lately, the assimilation skill hasn't been gaining much proficiency. It'll work out as long as we level it up some more. Assimilation, huh? That'd be nice, but I have a lot on my plate right now. Shin Woo's assimilation skill was already high rank level 7. It could only level up 3 more times. Would he really be able to handle her speed with just that? Actually, would he even be able to level it up? Shin Woo looked really disinclined and Jin retorted with a sullen voice. Sagald was kicking your ass in CQC last time. I fought against him with Arema, but I didn't even land a single hit. I just attacked. Although Shin Woo's combat senses were far greater than Jin's, their agility stats were ultimately different. If their assimilation was perfect, like Jin said, then Shin Woo wouldn't have been pushed back. They would be able to face off against Sagald in close quarters combat. Your combat techniques are inherently powerful too. You put in a lot of effort and were rewarded for it. But now you're giving up on a head-to-head fight just because you lost? If that's not what you're doing, wouldn't it make sense to humiliate him back? Why yeah, I think so too. Then, start training with me for at least 3 hours a day. Since it'd be more efficient to train with me than for you to try improving your reaction speed. Yes ma'am, I understand. There were no holes in her argument. Shin Woo was forced to lower his head at his partner's lecture, and Jin forgave him whilst sporting a serious expression. Jin was happy that she'd get 3 hours alone with him every day from now on, but Shin Woo wasn't astute enough to notice. He was just thinking about how to level up his assimilation skill as quickly as possible and then went back to Kratia. Lord Arema Steelworker, it's an honor to finally meet you. To think I'd have a chance to meet the star of the surface. I'm grateful to His Majesty for the opportunity. 3 days had passed since then. By then, a force of 300 strong had been sent down from the surface. It was an elite force, consisting mostly of level 6s with 2 level 7s and even a level 8. He could tell that the Emperor had planned for this. But there was something even more surprising than that. LV-8 Steel Armor General Harain von Batex, Elder Vampire. LV-7 Wind Demon General Melodo von Medane, Vampire. LV-7 Conviction General Kisera von Vulture, Vampire. These guys, they're not only members of the 12 generals, but also vampires. Moreover, all of the level 6s were vampires as well. So this is what the Emperor meant by training. Shin Woo was absolutely speechless. He supposed sending undead would make it much easier to pass through the barrier. I have to assume that they're connected to the Emperor through his lightning bind. The innate element that resulted from the fusion between the lightning and darkness element, lightning bind. It would force a connection between two people and was a fearsome innate element that allowed the Emperor to do certain things. But it wasn't as simple as it sounded. The Emperor couldn't just link himself to just anyone. As proof of this, there had been no link between Arema's golem body and the Emperor. But the people here must have been turned into vampires by the Emperor himself, so there was a chance that they were connected to him. There's no way the Emperor's suspicious of me. But there's a chance he wanted to see the underground himself. If that's the case, then he wouldn't be able to make them his subordinates through instigate. If so, then what was the best way to get rid of them? He'd already made his decision. Shin Woo inwardly smiled refreshingly and said, I already know where their base is. Let's get going immediately. You understood. You're not taking your time, I see. I just can't tolerate the sight of those insects any longer. He'd prepared for situations like this. His golem squad, which had been on standby outside, appeared. Once he was finished creating the mana radar, he focused on manufacturing golems. He managed to create more than 200 level 6 golems, and integrated some better materials into one of them, creating a level 7 elite golem as well. I apologize for asking now, but where are the 4 heavenly commanders? I'm going to ask Auntie Skull about them myself. Do you have a problem with that? No. Shin Woo's voice was tinged with anger, causing the vampires to flinch and become speechless. They hadn't known that Auntie Skull had killed the 4 heavenly commanders. The level 8 steel armor general was the only one able to endure the pressure, and Harain von Batex asked carefully. Lord Arema, have you found all of their bases? Of course. There are 5 of them. The Mana radar had obviously not only picked up Sigald's location but the location of the underground anti-skull bases as well. They broke up their forces, befitting a group that acted in the shadows, but it didn't matter. Shin Woo had figured out where all of them were. 5 bases. May I ask where they are? 4 of the 5 are nothing special. We just need to go there and destroy them. To be honest, Anti-Skull only had 4 bases underground. But destroying the last one will prove difficult. Why you're not saying? Harain, who was quick on the uptake, immediately realized what he was saying and gulped. Shin Woo nodded his head and declared, "They're building their forces within the capital. We have to kill them before they join forces with Jizahanu. Too bad there wasn't actually anything like that in the capital." First, Shin Woo split up the vampires into 3 groups and sent them off to 3 different anti-skull bases. He stated that he'd go to the last remaining base, but he was actually planning to send to the Pauls to take care of it. 3 days. In 3 days, we'll regroup here and then go to the capital. But Lord Urema, what about the Thorn Wall? You'll see when we get there. Prepare yourself for death, for the Emperor, for the Emperor. And so, Shin Woo expertly fooled them and sent them away. After that, he cemented his alibi. To be exact, he planned on sneaking into the capital alone as Urema and then barely coming out alive. Shin Woo, are you really going to go to the capital? Think about it. This is a good opportunity for me to take a look around the capital without them suspecting that it was the heaven-defying general or the heroes. Because he'd taken out Urema last, the palace didn't know what had happened to the Metal God General and his forces. He would cause chaos as Urema steelworker and paint a target on the vampires' backs. Then, he'd take what he came for and leave. I need to find out exactly where the train leads, in the capital, and see how it performs, and if I can, I'd like to go into the inner depths of the capital. But do you really have to take such a big risk? Can't you just take out the vampires after you kill Sigald and his forces? I may still be able to use the Emperor. But if I was the one to take them out, then the Emperor would know that I'm not the real Urema steelworker through his lightning bind. I want to avoid that. If at all possible, I want the vampires to fight someone else and die. Well, if it doesn't work out, I can always call the Pauls and make it look like an accident. Why wasn't he discarding the Emperor at this point in time? Jin couldn't understand why, so she just waited for Shin Woo to continue. Shin Woo grinned and went on to the crux of the matter. Moreover, it'd be nice if the Emperor kills Sigald, but if he doesn't, then what happens? When I think about that, I feel like I have to take matters into my own hands. Oh, come on, he's level 9. You really think he'd lose track of him? Sure, he's level 9, but all this time, he hadn't even noticed that Sigald was on the surface. Even I missed him once. Can he not use his full power unless he takes matters into his own hands? Shin Woo spoke boldly, but he'd actually encountered the Emperor once before and even escaped unscathed, so he wasn't talking out of his ass. To be brutally honest, he felt like the lightning bind element was kind of a wishy-washy ability. Lightning bind, an ability that forcefully creates a link between you and another. It allows him to bind his enemies, coerce his subordinates, or even allow him to transfer his consciousness to another, allowing him to see from afar. In many ways, it's a good ability, but there's one problem with it. It doesn't have any inherent combat power. But it seems strong enough to me. If you compare it to Sigald's Annihilation Flame or my Dark Shadow, then it's undoubtedly weaker in a pure combat sense. Should I say that it's unsuited for battle, or that it's disadvantageous in a real battle? He had a sudden thought. Perhaps the Emperor had obtained Lightning Bind because he wanted to control the Empire safely from the shadows. Though there weren't many cases of this, innate elements were largely influenced by one's karma. He had not only exiled both the powerful Second Prince and the Elementalists underground, but he laid traps in the capital, which were activated by his mana. Plus, he never acted on his own and just commanded his troops to act in his place. He couldn't help but think that the Magic Emperor was nothing more than a coward. Still, didn't you say that he's the one who created the barrier? Now he knows, there's no way that he'll lose Sigald. I'm just preparing for the, what if? Let's think about what happens if the Emperor loses Sigald. Then what'll Sigald do? If I were Sigald, then I'd hide. Isn't it the basics of the basics to regroup when you're at a disadvantage? Shin Woo firmly shook his head at Jin's remark. When something goes wrong, you have 2 options. To regroup, or to push forward. Sigald will probably pick the latter this time since the former requires time. One can only afford to relax and take care of themselves in a battle if they're willing to sacrifice time. But, think about it, the surface's magic emperor is gunning for him, and the heaven-defying general is waiting for him underground. Let's assume that Sigald's goal is to turn the undead emperor, Jizahanu, into anti-skull and invade the surface. When he realizes that his enemies have multiplied, would he think that buying time is the right decision? Oh, Jin didn't really understand, but she acted like she did and nodded her head. Shin Woo sighed softly and continued. So, his only choice would be to move forward with his plan. He'd be forced to proceed with his plan, even though he's surrounded on both sides. He'd then go straight for the capital, to Jizahanu. Yep. At that time, I'll force the vampires, the Imperial Army, and Anti-Skull to fight against each other, and, in the midst of all that, I'll achieve my own goal. Which is to kill Sigald. In other words, everything he'd done was to kill Sigald. He predicted what Sigald's next move would be and prepared accordingly. Plus, he blocked off all of his retreat paths and forced him into the jaws of death. Eliminating the anti-skull bases was part of that strategy. Indeed, it was just a small part of his strategy. Shin Woo, what the hell did you do in the past? I was a businessman. Is businessman some kind of secret code for some sort of hit squad? Ha 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 ha. Jin couldn't understand his entire explanation, but she knew one thing. What happened when you made Shin Woo your enemy? The moment Shin Woo had manipulated the Magic Emperor into pursuing Sigald was the moment that signed Sigald's death warrant. I'm going to scout the capital, simultaneously chip away at the Imperial Army and the Vampire's forces, and kill Sigald. These are my goals for this operation. So that's well act as the bridgehead for the final battle, huh? Haha. This could actually be the final battle. What are you talking about? You're not going to the capital to fight the Emperor, are you? Jin freaked out and yelled. However, Shin Woo just shook his head, saying that she got it all wrong, but didn't give her a proper explanation. Since he knew that she wouldn't understand anything he said at the moment. Eek, try to understand. We don't know if it'll go according to plan. I'll explain it to you once things have become a bit more clear. TCH. Jin was pissed that Shin Woo wasn't willing to reveal his plan to even her, his partner, but she didn't show it, as a skeleton horse wouldn't look cute no matter how much it pouted. Instead, if you want to get out of that mess, then you'll have to train some more. Let's get back to training. Fine. Shin Woo thought back to the past few days and dry heaved. During their training, he couldn't tell the difference between heaven and earth, or the difference between himself and Jin. But at the end of their training, he did manage to level up his assimilation skill to level 8. However, when Jin realized this, she increased the difficulty of their training even further. How harsh must that training have been if his combat sense skill, which grew at a snail's pace, leveled up to level 8? It was harder to stay atop Jin's back than fighting against the enemy. He steeled himself, promising himself that he'd get through this training, but that resolve of his was torn to shreds just 20 minutes into their training. Not yet. Your reaction to that turn was too slow. If you can't handle the speed, then you won't be able to fight properly. Tense up your muscles and react. You've never even ridden a horse before, so how the hell do you even know that? Next, accelerate, turn vertically, and ascend. Shin Woo was the one who'd given her wings, but she had managed to use those wings to fly in a manner he hadn't even imagined. Is this what he got for opening Pandora's box? Shin Woo choked down his tears and clung onto Jin's back. Unfortunately, he didn't know that him doing that caused Jin to only get worse. A little bit later, Shin Woo finished his training with Jin and found Kraisha. She was mentally exhausted, so when she looked at him, she only slightly opening her eyes and said quietly, Shin Woo, who are you fighting? Myself. Just forgive them already. You still have a lot to do, Shin Woo. I want to forgive her too, but Jin won't forgive me. Kraisha figured that Jin's goal was a lot different than what Shin Woo thought, and wondered whether she should tell him or not. But it was true that Shin Woo and Jin's skills were improving, so she decided to keep her mouth shut. I'd like to improve the Titan before you go to the capital. It's not as easy as it sounds. If you bring the perfected Titan core with you, then there'll be less for me to worry about. So you were worried about me. We're partners after all. In a way, improving the Titan core would prove to be much more difficult than improving the Huggins eye. While he knew what areas of the Huggins eye he wanted to improve and focus on, he was still at the drawing board for the Titan core. He didn't know how to combine the Titan core and the demon heart. It's simple, we just use it on the outside. Wait, you want to use this precious mana metal to make armor? We'll definitely be able to get it to level 9. I can already fight against level 9s. This thing can't just be any normal level 9. It has to be an ultimate weapon that will allow me to overcome any unforeseen situations. Shin Woo wanted to imbue the Titan core with the demon heart's properties. The demon heart that was the result of the evil eye overlapping again and again. At this point, it was the very definition of being overlapped. If that ability was transferred to the Titan, then what would happen? He would not only be able to overlap his dark flame, but also his other flames. No, if things went well, then he may be able to surpass that and stack all of his abilities together, sublimating them into something new. Though I honestly feel like it's just a pipe dream. In any case, let's begin. We studied the shining flame yesterday, right? Let's study the dark flame today. In order to figure out how to harmonize different elements together in the Titan core, Shin Woo started with helping Kraisha understand how each of these elements worked. It was time well spent, as they not only gained a greater understanding of the demon heart in the Titan core, but also increased Kraisha's control over her own element at an exponential rate. No, her skills improved even more so. Shin Woo. What? Thanks. For what? Shin Woo shrugged his shoulders and manifested his dark flame. Kraisha created an ice crystal, touched the dark flame with it, and smiled. Not yet. The Emperor still hadn't contacted him yet. The next morning, Shin Woo was staring into the eyes of Sarah, the beauty with gray hair and eyes. She had somehow figured out that Shin Woo's goal was to kill Sigald and had grabbed onto him. I'll go too. No, I'm going. Stay here and train some more. Kiet, I'll go no matter what. Why was she clinging to him? She obviously wanted to go with Shin Woo. It was easy enough to figure out, but don't you remember how badly you failed last time? Don't you think you should just stay and watch? This is my primary reason for living, even if I had to become an undead. I won't overdo it. Please let me go with you. Sarah was calm and collected. He didn't know what she was thinking, but at the very least, she didn't show any signs of insanity like before. Honestly, it would be a huge problem if she did show any signs. Since the effects of the undead curse had been completely dispelled. I beg of you, Shin Woo. I'll do everything you ask of me. I won't be foolish like last time. Please take me with you. Do you really need to see your older brother's death that badly? Yes, I must. A faint light shone within her gray eyes. Shin Woo realized that these were a banshee's tears. The dense magic within them was difficult for even Shin Woo to comprehend. Please don't doubt me. I should be able to help you. I also practiced my banshee abilities plenty. Right now, I'm definitely a good match for you. A good match, huh? Banshees specialize in mental confusion, right? To be more specific, it's the ability to manipulate a situation. Manipulating a situation, if it's as you say, then it does indeed have good compatibility with my wildcard skill. Honestly, he didn't really know the specifics to a banshee's ability, even though he was the one who led to her creation. However, he'd heard that banshees were an undead species that possessed a peculiar authority. They were an incredibly rare species and their creation required several conditions. Because of these stringent conditions, they were extremely powerful in exchange. Moreover, she was no normal banshee. She was a level 8 elder banshee princess. Her authority was definitely amazing. Shin Woo briefly thought about it, and if he followed her logic, then she would indeed be a trustworthy ally. However, alright, then prove it. I can't take you with me before I have a chance to assess your abilities myself. Of course, it'd be nice if there were a dungeon nearby. You'll find one if you follow the mana patterns of living monsters. Just wait a sec, I'm going to use the mana radar too. Huh? Shin Woo rummaged for his mana radar, but then stopped. Kai Paul, who should have been in the middle of destroying one of the anti-skull bases, sent him an unbelievable report. We're being pushed back, father. Please send reinforcements. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and listened vacantly. You're being pushed back? No matter how large anti-skull was, Their forces were split among 4 bases. If he included the base on the surface, then they would probably be split among 5 bases, so he thought his pulse would be more than enough to clear them out. But they were being pushed back? It's the Annihilation Flame Sword God, Father. He appeared out of nowhere while we were fighting. What? Why had the Annihilation Flame Sword God, who should still be on the surface, suddenly appeared underground? Shin Woo furrowed his brow at the unbelievable news, and then Kai Paul added something else he couldn't understand. He disappeared again. He sustained heavy losses, but we have several members who need immediate treatment. Father, I apologize, but could you come personally? What? Kai Paul was so flustered that Shin Woo couldn't understand him. Shin Woo gritted his teeth, called Jin over, and mounted her. Sarah followed suit and rode behind him, grabbing onto Shin Woo's waist. Hey, let go. I'm sorry. Please excuse me, Shin Woo. I don't like this girl. I knew that already, but the situation's urgent, so we have to go right away. I have to go and check things out myself. Full speed ahead. You got it. Full speed. Oogwa. Jin paid Sarah back for treating her like some convenient ride, and by the end of it, Sarah looked like a reanimated corpse. In any case, they quickly arrived at their destination due to Jin running at top speed. We once served the Empire together, so why do we have to fight against each other? Open your eyes, soldiers. You're the one in the wrong. We saw Sigald preach freedom while stabbing his younger sister in the heart. You fools. He came to the site of a battle in full swing between the Pauls and Anti-Skull. This base was well hidden and was protected by a barrier, so Shin Woo thought it would just take some time to break the barrier and fight them. He didn't think the Pauls would have any problems against them. But what he saw, Lord Paul Zero has come. Father, my apologies, but please take care of these guys. Once he saw Shin Woo, Kai Paul, who fought more fiercely than anyone and was protecting the wounded, rejoiced and yelled. Shin Woo looked at Kai Paul and doubted his eyes. Kai Paul, who had become a level 8 Android Zero just a short while ago and had gained a body similar to Rama Steelworkers, was a complete mess. Of his injuries, his most severe were burns. Kai Paul can wield fire and possesses fire resistance, yet he's been burned? Then, it really was Sigald. No, did he even really disappear? I'm sure of it, but I believe there was some sort of condition for appearing so suddenly. Shin Woo listened to Kai Paul's report and immediately activated the Mana radar, but Sigald really wasn't here. However, he wasn't on the surface either. He was underground, probably in the centermost Anti-Skull base. No wait, his location just changed. Sigald had moved to another base. This is like that damn Lish is. Whatever, so long as he's not here. Let's start treatment first. Come over here if you're dying. Shin Woo activated a wide-range bone reinforcement on the wounded Pauls. This was why he'd accumulated all these bones. Shin Woo had expended 20% of his stored-up bones all at once, fully restoring the health of the injured Pauls. They were all in perfect condition, aside from those who'd been broken into pieces and died. But in that short period of time, we lost 700 of them. Once he appeared, he used a widespread flame. Those at high levels were able to endure it, but anyone level 5 or less didn't have enough resistance, so. Shin Woo listened to the rest of Kai Paul's report, who sported a bitter expression despite being fully healed, and gritted his teeth. This was the first time he'd ever sustained such heavy losses since taking command of the Pauls. He felt even more bitter, as he'd sustained such losses from something he hadn't expected. If he knew this would happen, then he would have eschewed the idea of sending the Pauls to gain some combat experience and come himself. But it was too late to start regretting it now. His rage towards Sigald would not abate and burned bright. One of the level 7 giants was killed. If Arogan and Alada weren't here, then we would have sustained even heavier losses. As expected, even now, the 2 level 7 elite titans, Alada and Arogan, rampaged about on the front lines of the battlefield. They had sustained some severe burns as well, but their anger gave them strength and allowed them to push through the pain. Why did Sigald show up here all of a sudden? Let's figure that out later. First, this is a good place to show you what I can do. Shin Woo was about to rush forward to the front lines, along with Alada and Arogan, but then, Sarah, who had been drooped over, recovered and stepped into the air. Her gray hair and dress fluttered in the air. You could fly. Now really isn't the time to be asking that, is it? I'm a banshee, so isn't it only natural that I can change into an astral body? Her body slightly shone. In this way, she was quite similar to an immortal, Dana's species. Sarah realized what he was thinking and smiled slightly. Perhaps it was because you revived me first that you were able to turn Dana into an immortal after. Banshees and immortals seem similar, but they are fundamentally different. Though it took me some time before I came to that realization. Specifically, immortals avoid death, but I bring death. Shin Woo, you made us like this. Your ability to switch between life and death made us like this. She said and entered the battlefield garbed in her fluttering dress. Shin Woo saw crystals of light form around her eyes and instinctively covered his ears. Jiok, Gua, the frightening shriek resounded throughout the battlefield. All who heard her cry staggered. Her cry didn't differentiate between ally or foe, and all were anguished by it. But then, something happened. Something so shocking that it made him forget about what had just happened. Kahak, how can this be? Lord Sigald will rescue. Kuuk, the grievously wounded anti-skull troops toppled over all at once, as if they'd planned this beforehand. Hundreds of soldiers had been incapacitated, and the Pauls took that opportunity to finish the rest of them off. There were some among the anti-skull troops that died by themselves without them needing to finish them off. I see. This is a banshee's cry. It's not a cry that forewarns death, but a cry that actually calls death. Jiok, Huhi, whenever her screams, which sounded akin to wailing or sobbing, resounded far and wide through the battlefield, the anti-skull soldiers would stagger. The lower-leveled, unwounded soldiers would fall to the floor, and the level 6 and 7 officers were affected as well. This is our chance. Push them back. A banshee's cry. This cry is helping us. It's a funeral march. The banshee is singing a funeral march for our enemies. Everyone should be able to hear her cries, yet for some strange reason, only the anti-skull were affected. The others weren't negatively impacted by her cries at all. At most, they would feel goosebumps. Although it was such a formidable authority, it could differentiate between friend and foe. Hundreds of anti-skull troops met death at the hands of her cries, and then hundreds more died. When Shin Woo had first arrived, the battle was a close one, but now, the fight had entirely turned in the Paul's favor. This has elemental power mixed in. In the midst of all that, Shin Woo came to a realization. She wasn't just crying. Sarah was imbuing her cries with the light element. Light was the power of severing. With it, she wouldn't allow it to affect anyone on her side. In other words, she was controlling it so that it wouldn't affect anyone in the same contract as her. It wasn't something just anyone could do. Sarah could proficiently wield the light element, so it was possible for her. Wait a sec, isn't this the first time that granny's actually making herself useful? Shin Woo thought momentarily, but it was obvious she'd hate him if he said it out loud, so he kept his mouth shut. A banshee's cry resounded through the battlefield once more. And 30 minutes later, the battle ended.